we two having? What's so disgusting? The fuck? Your face. You're doing it in my face? You said no. I haven't showered. No, I haven't. I've literally just hopped out of bed and turned on the stream. Yeah. This is. Not even showing yourself. Alright, what? No, I showered last night, guys. What the fuck? You guys are cringe. Okay, yeah, so anyway, yeah. I'm gonna eat food, watch these early panels, do some reacts, and then we'll be going in. We'll be popping off. It's gonna be sick, boys. Get your PogChamps ready. This is not gonna be a HotelCon stream, okay? We're just starting off with the HotelCon, and then we're going in, boys. Alright? How the fuck is someone redeeming Zoom? The fuck is this? Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna, okay. I'll see you guys in a bit. I'm gonna just turn my shit off now so I don't fucking fuck up the stream. One sec. I'm muting. That's them, by the way. That ain't me. Just to be clear.
And I also want to go, this time I want to go deeper in explaining how these techniques actually work. So it's probably going to get quite intense. I guess brace yourselves. There's a lot of stuff. The first technique, let's just get right onto it. The first technique I want to talk to you about is flowing materials. It's a very basic technique that is used everywhere in our game. It's a pretty typical effect. So how do we do this? Well, let's break it down. This is an effect that is driven by a velocity map. So the goal is to have a texture that flows according to some flow that we calculate from somewhere, provided as a texture or we calculate it. The way you'd naively try to do this is, what if we try to apply a displacement to a texture and then just keep increasing that displacement over time? Well, this is what it creates. It creates this nasty warp texture. You just cannot keep distorting the texture indefinitely. So how do we solve this problem? Well, the way this problem is solved is usually you have layers. So you see this layer appears, shifts a little bit, and then it disappears. It fades in, shifts a little bit, fades out. And then if we apply two of these layers that shift out of sync with each other, you get a perfectly smooth transition from one to another. So you don't see how they actually fade. But we went further. This technique has a downside that if you stare carefully enough, you can see the fading between these two layers, because when entire layer fades out and then the other layer fades in, you can see some sort of a transition. The way you can solve this is you can also apply some sort of a noise to each of these layers to create this more random looking, more organic looking transition, so that each layer flows, but instead of fading in and out entirely, it has some sort of noise applied to it. And if we apply two of these layers together, then it looks much smoother. It looks like much smoother transition. So we use this for lava, for water, for any sort of liquid, basically. By the way, for this specific technique, I prepared a shader toy demonstration, because I very frequently I'm asked this question: how do I start programming graphics? Like, what do I do if I want to start graphics programming? Well, I always answer that, in my opinion, the best thing to learn graphics is just do graphics. Try programming shaders, and a great way to start programming shaders is get a shader that works. For example, this shader that I provided here that implements this effect, and just start hacking it. You can modify, you can see its effects on shader toy. Here's a link, and just experiment with it and learn this way. Next technique that I call subsurface ray marching. Here's an example of what it allows to do. You're going to see a lot of Ranger, because we typically use the model for all our tests. So what is ray marching? Ray marching is a process in computer graphics of rendering any sort of volumetric material. So when you have fog, when you have water, when you have some sort of material that transmits light and doesn't block it entirely. Challenges of ray marching is that it usually involves a sort of a loop. When you ray march through a volume, you need to apply light, you need to calculate lighting for every step of your ray. And that's typically very expensive. But you can see that a lot of games still do this, because if you have to render a volume, there is nothing else you can do, so you do this anyway. But there is a better way. What if we ray march in a texture space instead? Then we don't need to store actually a 3D volume data. We can just use a single 2D texture and derive multiple layers from it. So here's an illustration how this can work. Blue is a view ray, orange is a surface that we are rendering, and there is a bunch of parallel planes that are subsurface planes. So we can calculate texture coordinates for these subsurface planes, and if we align them together, they look like a volume. So here's an example of what it looks like. For example, you see multiple volumes of water, sort of debris floating, and you see the nice parallax between them. Another example. You can also do a bunch of effects that look, they all look like there is multiple surfaces, but they are all actually one surface, and the look of multiple surfaces is created in the shader by introducing multiple layers that are blended in the shader. Some more examples. This is a life orb that we planned to use for the UI, but unfortunately it's making an ExileCon. But you can go further. The thing that you can also do is you can use data that is already present on your screen to calculate color of each volume. And what it allows is it allows you to calculate lighting of a surface only once and then reuse that information multiple times to render multiple layers. This is how we can render stuff like fur. And actually this technique I noticed is used in quite a lot of games recently, but I don't think it has like enough academic weight so that people publish papers about it. Different companies keep using similar techniques, they keep inventing similar clever techniques, but nobody really talks about them because, well, I don't know why. I just think these ideas are worth sharing and they're worth knowing about. Another example is some bear with an isotropic lighting model, some more experiments with the Ranger. The way these techniques function is they rely heavily on this transformation called TBN. TBN is a basis that allows us to translate small steps in world space into small steps in UV space. So this way, when we are ray marching a world ray, we can also calculate small offsets in a texture. It's used in lots of other techniques such as parallax mapping, etc., etc. It's not like a new invention, but if you are interested in computer graphics, I really advise you to familiarize yourself with this technique just because of the huge range of effects you can implement with it. Next technique I want to discuss, by the way, uses TBN base as well, is called subsurface shadows. This is an example of a technique that allows to render translucent sort of shadows. So like imagine, for example, if there is a shadow in smoke, you don't see a hard shadow, it gets blurred along the light direction. And typically, in order to simulate these shadows, you again need to employ volume rendering, which can be quite expensive. But there is a much cheaper way. And the way this can be done, the reason why it can be implemented this way is because typical shadow map implementation involves an operation called percentage closed filtering, which is a loop that samples texture in a small radius to create this blurry look. But if there is already a loop, the cost, the expensive part of a shadow mapping operation is already paid. So we have come up with this idea of what if we use the same loop to also ray march along the ray and also blur the shadow not only in a radius but in depth as well. And this is basically how it works. You can create for free because the cost is already paid of PCF. The cost is already paid. We can just spread our samples instead of spreading them in radius, just spread them along a ray. You get this translucent effect for free. Next technique that we have employed, we call contact parallax. This is an example of what it looks like. A very typical problem that comes with artists excessively overusing parallax, because artists love parallax, obviously, is that in order for parallax surfaces to intersect with each other, you need to either write fragment depth for each fragment of a parallax surface, or or do something similar, but it's very expensive, because if a fragment writes depth, the shader becomes very expensive. However, there is a much better way that avoids writing depth. Oh, by the way, another significant drawback of writing depth, it also creates nasty aliasing, because when a parallax mapped surface intersects with another surface, it creates nasty aliasing that is very hard to get rid of. But there is a much better way. What if you just get rid of the depth test, and what if you just fade surfaces? So here's an example of a surface. Here's an example of a surface. Yellow is a surface, and it intersects with this ground, black ground here. But instead of applying depth test that creates this harsh intersection line between parallax surface and the ground, what if you just apply a smooth transition from one to the other and creates this much nicer effect, basically again for free. So you see, this allows us to blend parallax surface into ground that creates a much nicer transition. Again, this is a technique that is kind of at some point, well, in some sense it's obvious, but nobody really talks about it, because I guess people consider it too obvious. I'm not sure. I know that a lot of other games do this same thing. Like, I noticed Diablo 4 does this, a bunch of other games do the same thing, but I've never seen a publication on it, so I think it's just worth discussing, so that people get inspired by these ideas. Next technique was developed to solve a very prolific problem in PoE specifically, and honestly in many other games. This is rendering decals. What is a decal? Decal is basically a flat surface that you want to make it look like it's sitting on the ground. But very typical problem that happens when you try to do this is your surface intersects the ground ever so slightly, and you get these nasty intersection lines when your surface, your decal, intersects the ground. And there is sort of workarounds that people employ to mitigate this problem. For example, lifting decals slightly above ground. There is another technique called projective decals that has a lot of drawbacks. It's also very expensive. So while thinking about, like, what do we do about this problem? You see, like, this nasty line. The reason why this line appears is because of depth test. Again, because when two surfaces intersect, only one of them wins, the one that is closer to you. So either one surface wins the depth test, either the ground or the decal, and you always can see only one of them. So we asked ourselves, what if we just get rid of the depth test? And the better way to do this is if you just disable depth test completely and replace it again with smooth fade. This allows us to create a much nicer transition. But however, in order to mitigate the problem of surfaces having wrong parallax when they appear under the surface, we can also correct their UVs to a UV that they would have had if they were sitting perfectly on the ground. This is relatively easy to do. It's techniques, again, similar to parallax occlusion mapping. But this combination of correcting UVs to a UVs of a surface sitting perfectly on the ground, as well as disabling depth test, allows us to create basically perfect decals that have none of the drawbacks of the typical decals, and they're very easy for artists to set up. So here is how this decal intersects with the ground. You see, it never sharply appears, it never sharply disappears, it never creates harsh transitions. It's very smooth, very easy to use for artists. And here's a side-by-side comparison, what it looks like on a player scale with and without this technique. And next technique that I think is worth discussing. Again, it's not exactly a novel technique. It's used actually pretty widely in compressing videos. Very typical thing that artists like to do is they build flipbooks of effects. So basically a flipbook is a bunch of frames, usually 16 or 9 frames of a certain animation that they flick through. And if you just flick through frames of an animation, you see the transition from one to another. It looks like shifting, like interpolating sharply between frames. But the way to mitigate this is called motion vectors. You can distort source frame towards the destination frame, and you can distort the destination frame towards the source frame as they blend from one to another. And this way you can create a much smoother transition with very low frame rates. So this flipbook, for example, has just 16 frames during the entire animation. But if we apply motion vectors to this, it can look much smoother. Like it's the same amount of memory used, but looks like a much smoother transition. The big question is always, how do you calculate motion vectors? And this question has no simple answer. There is no algorithm that gives you perfect motion vectors. They are even defined in a kind of sort of ambiguous way. So every game company that uses this technique has to basically reinvent their motion vectors in some sense. And I want to tell you how we do this. Another example of just two frames blending. So this is source frame, destination frame. You see how they smoothly blend into each other because of motion vectors. The way we do this is we build this hierarchical representation of motion vectors. First, we find motion vectors in a very low resolution way. So just a very coarse picture of what our motion vectors would look like on the left. Then on the right you see more, we refine that representation of motion vectors, and we can adaptively find perfect motion vectors by stacking these levels of details of motion vectors. Here's an example. This is a source frame of some flipbook. This is the destination frame of a flipbook. We need to find motion vectors that translate this image into this image. Basically, we need to distort one image towards the other. The way we are going to do this is first we are going to overlay them. I'm showing the first frame in red here and the second frame in green here. And when you combine red and green, you get yellow. So if we apply perfect motion vectors to this image, it should get completely yellow. So let's try to yellow this image. First, we are going to apply a very rough, I think it's just 4x4 motion vectors displacement. And you see like these frames already kind of sort of match, but in a very crude way. Then I'm going to keep refining and adding higher and higher resolution motion vectors. And you see here the iterative process that converges these images together and finds finer and finer refinements. And this is what it looks like when we apply the motion vectors to these two frames. You see a nice smooth transition from one frame to another frame. So this is a technique that we use, well, for all our skills, for flipbooks, for flames, for all that sort of VFX. Another technique I want to discuss today is bent normal shadows. Here's what it looks like. Bent normal shadows on, bent normal shadows off. Here's a comparison side by side. On the left, bent normal shadows off, bent normal shadows on. The problem they're solving is that when we have a texture of a material that contains in it some big geometry, for example, a normal map, this texture never encodes information about shadowing. So normal maps don't shadow themselves, if I put it this way. So how do we overcome this problem? How do we make it so that the micro details in a normal map also cast shadows onto each other? Well, actually, the answer is that the information needed for this is already encoded into the normal map. It's encoded in AO. Ambient occlusion is a map that encodes information about adjacent geometry to every point. And we can actually reuse that information to cast shadows. What if we use baked occlusion for this? The way it works is for every point we can define a cone that is guaranteed to not occlude any light that's coming from within this cone. The angle of this cone can be derived from AO, and the direction of this cone can be derived from a thing called bent normals. So bent normals basically, for each surface point, defines the direction that the light is most visible from. So this is the direction that you least expect to see a shadow from. So this is obviously an approximation, but it's a pretty neat approximation because we can use even normals or LOD of a normal or mipmap of a normal for the bent normal direction. We can use AO for the angle of the cone to create self-shadowing for very cheaply. It's almost free, applying this thing to a shadow in a shadow shader. And this is actually the technique that we use for lighting on the PoE UI. Like actually the UI is completely 2D, but all the shadows that you see from in-game light sources are done with bent normals. Next subject, GPU particles. GPU particles is, here's an example of what it looks like. This is one of the very early tests. Do you recognize the Ranger? The point of GPU particles is if you have a finite amount of time, for example, one frame, where would you rather spend this one frame worth of calculation, for example, 1 millisecond, on the CPU or on the GPU? Well, the answer is it really depends on what exactly you're calculating. For example, calculating gameplay is much more efficient on the CPU. You're much better off spending 1 millisecond calculating a gameplay code on the CPU rather than on GPU. But GPU is really good for calculating very simple, very repetitive tasks in huge amounts. And particles is exactly that. So that's why it's just very natural to calculate particle behavior on the GPU. And also, it comes with very nice benefits that particle systems have access to stuff that is only present on the GPU, such as depth buffer, so we can do a bunch of interesting things with it. We actually developed a pretty intense, pretty in-depth GPU particle system that even allows some minor physics simulation. This is simulating some particles interacting with the ground. And we fully integrated with our graph editing system. So our materials are designed with these graphs that VFX artists can use, just visually connect things. And we just implemented our GPU particles into the same pipeline. Here's another example of a GPU particle system. You see, now we can allow having many more particles, like 2 orders of magnitude more particles in the same calculation time as before, just because we have offloaded that calculation from the CPU onto the GPU. In the same amount of time, your GPU can calculate many more particles than your CPU. Here's another example of GPU particles. And here's a bunch of, I really like these player skills. So you see when the meteor strikes or when the nova strikes, there is a whole bunch of particles attracted by the shock wave. And another example, I'm not sure if it was shown yet, but this is a player skill with an ice shield. And these ice particles, they too reflect, they react to players moving, they react to attacks from monsters. Next technique, rendering water. Last time we already discussed some things about rendering water related to flow maps. But in my opinion, the hardest part about rendering water is rendering specifically waves that wash up on the shore. That is just so hard. If you look up on the internet how to render water or whatever articles, you can find like 1 million articles of how to render water surface or how to render rivers, but you will find no articles whatsoever about how to render beach waves, because it's so hard. Like, there is simply no accepted solutions like, look, here's how you do it, because it's good and it just works. Because all solutions to render that types of waves are either bad or really complicated. So today I want to tell you the way we do this. Just to give you the idea. This is the effect that I'm talking about. So basically when waves wash up on the shore, they dissipate, etc., etc. So the unfortunate part about this task is that there is almost nothing we can pre-calculate. Like, even approaching this task, like, what do they even do? It's a pretty complicated task. And there is a lot of moving parts. So one very important thing is when you need to solve such a complex task as rendering waves that wash up on the shore, it really helps to break it down into parts and try to make them as independent as possible. So for example, rendering water surface itself should be completely decoupled from constructing the geometry of water surface, because these two tasks can be solved completely independently, and they should be solved completely independently. It's just much easier to tackle them this way. Another thing that I sort of taken away from doing this is that there is going to be a lot of parameters. Like controlling behavior of water, there is literally hundreds of numerical parameters, there is thousands of functional parameters. And the only way to deal with them is to limit the range of each parameter, basically to define the correct range that each parameter is allowed to have. So for example, distance can be only positive, right? Distance cannot be negative, etc. Basically just basic physical limitations. And you renormalize every parameter to have this correct range of 0 to 1, so that you can never have the temptation to have like, well, I would rather set this parameter to 1.3. No, just define a set range of parameters that are safe, that you guarantee your shader will always work correctly with, if your parameters are within this range. Well, let's break down how the shader works. So first, we break water into these zones. You see these parallel zones, and within each zone there is a layer that carries one wave. I am here applying a noise to this wave that shapes it in the maximum possible amplitude. So this noise is just a sine wave that goes from -1 to 1. So the wave cannot be deformed any more than this. And this is very important. Let me show you why. Because if we apply 2 of these layers, you need these layers to never intersect with each other. Because the shader only calculates 2 layers for any given point. And if we allow the waves to deform any more than this, then they would start overlapping and the shader would stop working. That's why I brought up the allowed range. So again, what happened here is there is 1 layer. Then I color in a different way. Then I overlay multiple layers. And you see we are already creating sort of a seamless thing that where 1 wave overlaps correctly with another wave. Next thing is we color it in a more natural way. Then we replace the sine wave dummy noise with just a texture noise that looks nicer. Next step is we apply some sort of screening on top of each one of these layers. Then we apply distortion to make these layers more organic, and that's how we get the final effect, basically. So just to get through this again, this is layers, then we overlap these layers, then we color them, then we apply more organic noise, more noise, and this is the final effect that you get. Next technique, and actually a lot of previous techniques, they all often intertwine. Like you see, most of these techniques use, for example, TBN bases in some sense. Most of these techniques use fields. So what is fields? Fields allow creating any sort of liquid-looking surfaces. Basically, when opacity of a surface is in some way connected to its normal map, which is almost the case for liquids. So whenever a liquid dissipates, it has like a vertical normal. When it doesn't dissipate, it has like a horizontal normal. So this basically allows creating sort of blobs. The way field is not an our invention thing. They are widely used in all sorts of shader demos and demo scene. It's a very popular technique. But for some reason, well, it rarely gets into the hands of artists. Like demo sceners use this thing all the time, but for some reason VFX artists don't use it that often. And I decided, like, how can we expose it to artists? How can we give them this tool that allows them to create liquid surfaces? Basically, a field is, simply put, is just a value and the vector that says how much this value changes. So basically it's a value plus its gradient. And then you can add these fields just by adding a value and its gradient. You can multiply them the same way how you add a value and the gradient, etc., etc. You can do all sorts of operations that you usually do with just a floating point value, but you can do them with a field. And this field carries information about a surface opacity and at the same time about the normal associated with the surface. So it basically allows conducting all sorts of surface operations with preserving correct normals that react correctly to light, that react correctly to rotations. Here's another example of fields, which is a Druid skill volcano. That's done with fields. Again, fields are integrated into our graph editor so that artists can basically utilize them. Here's another example, just some test effect with water. And the last but not least, probably my proudest achievement that I want to discuss, global illumination. What is global illumination? Well, global illumination is the process of light bouncing between surfaces. Here is what it looks like if this scene has global illumination on. Here's the same scene without global illumination off. You can see that light gets propagated from really bright areas into darker areas. And the way that this process works is each point of the scene casts light onto every other point of the scene, and every point of the scene receives light from every other point of the scene, and also each point of the scene can block light between arbitrary other points. This many-to-many interaction is just notoriously hard to calculate. Calculating global illumination is an extremely hard problem. I dare to say it's the hardest problem in computer graphics. And actually calculating global illumination is relatively easy. There is an algorithm called path tracing. It's just the only problem is that it takes like minutes to render every frame. It's extremely slow. The hard part is calculating in real time, like in a game scenario. And there is a lot of typical ways that they solve this in the industry. And unfortunately, none of them really fit us. And we had to do better than that. And our previous solution that we talked about on the previous ExileCon was, dare I say, the first of its kind in the industry. We implemented in PoE, and PoE was the first game that shipped with a screen space global illumination based on variance. And it was very novel at the time. But it had just a few drawbacks that really kept gnawing me in my sleep. I really wanted to solve them. And these drawbacks come primarily from the fact that our screen space shadows had very important properties that our global illumination didn't. And these properties is that parts of our screen space shadow algorithm that don't require much detail are calculated in a much lower resolution. So our shadows are implemented via these cascades. So you see the first cascade here has only low resolution part of each shadow. Second image has only higher resolution of the shadows. And the last part is a tiny bit that requires shadows to be calculated in the highest resolution. But it means that each of these can be calculated in vastly different resolutions, making it much cheaper to calculate this in a downscaled resolution, rather than if we were trying to calculate the entirety of the thing in the same highest resolution. So this is a very important property that our shadow mapping algorithm has that actually I still haven't seen any other game implement this in this way with cascaded shadow maps. And I really wanted to adapt this property to our lighting. So I wanted our GI, global illumination, to have this property as well. So the typical way people implement global illumination is with radiance probes. Radiance probes are these, you can think of them as tiny cameras that you put all around your level, your geometry, that take a cube map, basically a photo of what surrounds each point. And then you use that information and code it in these cube maps, in these light probes, to light any object. Basically, see if I'm standing here, I'm checking what's the nearest camera to me contain. It contains this cube map. I'm applying this lighting to myself. Here, this is an approximation of global illumination. But the big question to ask here is, how many of these cameras do I need? What resolution do I need to use for each of these probes? And you can see that every game development studio comes up with their own answer. Some game development studios use lots of tiny probes. Other game development studios use a lot of much fewer, much higher resolution probes. And it seems like there is no answer. But what if we use them all? What if we create a hierarchy? When we have both high-resolution probes, but very few of them, and we use another grid with much more probes, where each probe is has much lower resolution. This is what I call radiance probe hierarchy. I was struck with this idea, and I just needed to implement this. Implementing this 3D was very hard, so I just decided to do a 2D test. By the way, 2D global illumination is almost as hard as 3D global illumination. So I just decided to test in 2D. Those of you subscribed to my YouTube channel, you might have seen this experiment where this is 2D global illumination, basically works perfectly. Like this idea worked perfectly on the first implementation, which never happened. Here is a breakdown of how it works. You can see that there is these cascades, that each cascade contains a different number of rays, which corresponds to different resolution of the light probe. And if I change the cascades, they converge to proper lighting. So this is final image, and this is how it's constructed, construction from these cascades. Well, let's see in closer detail how these cascades work. On the left, you see a grid of cascades, grid of probes, where each probe casts just 4 rays. So you see, like, 4 rays from this probe, 4 rays from this probe, etc. Just a grid of probes. The right cascade contains fewer probes, but each probe casts more rays. But the question is, how many rays do we get if we combine these two cascades? It gets very messy. You cannot really read easily what's happening on the left image, just what happens when I combine the probes. But if you look at every individual probe, we can see that we can actually construct 8 rays per probe. These rays are not perfect, they are slightly bent. You see, well, rays are normally straight lines, right? But these rays are slightly bent. However, if we make these segments shorter, they will start approximating lines more and more perfectly. So we can actually, this thing converges to perfect rays. But there is 8 rays per probe, and there is 16 probes. So the first image contains 64 segments. The second one contains 32 segments. But when we combine them, we can create 128 rays total. Well, this is curious. This means that if we increase the number of these cascades, so I have just shown 3, right? The number of rays that we cast with increasing number of cascades is 64, 128, 256, it's power of 2. But the total cost for calculating these cascades approaches a constant. We can calculate 100 cascades at almost the same cost as we calculate one cascade, because each next cascade is cheaper than the previous one. When I first realized this fact, my mind was blown, because this is a property that you see in no other rendering approach out there. At least I haven't seen anything like this. This means that the number of rays increases exponentially with the number of cascades that we use. And the total cost of infinite number of cascades is bound. It's less than a constant. Like, what? But this is literally what it is. This is what I learned when I implemented the first 2D version of GI. Rays get exponentially cheaper with more cascades. So the more rays you have, the cheaper they get. But this is literally what it is. Well, I was quite excited when that 2D demo worked. Obviously, the next question was, how do I adapt this to PoE? Because PoE is 3D, and implementation of it was my first implementation was 2D. Well, long story short, we did get there. We did implement this algorithm in 3D. Here is how it works. This is the first cascade. You see it captures information about only in tiny vicinity of each point. Basically, it looks like bad AO that you typically see in games. Next cascade captures longer field information, and it's lower frequency. Next contains even lower frequency, and so on. So we create this hierarchy of probes, where when each level of hierarchy captures only a specific range of radiance of light, basically. But then the magic happens when we combine them all. Because this way we can get details of all scales, from fine details to very long distance details in the same image, by combining information from all of the hierarchy levels. This is how we encode, for those you graphics program aficionados, this is how we encode screen space probes, basically in these tiny grids. You can see that this level contains these tiny probes, there is a lot of them. And this level contains much larger probes, and there is much less of them. But the memory that each layer, that each cascade level contains actually decreases the more cascades you have. So the first cascade is the more expensive one. Weirdly enough, the cascade that contains the tiniest bit of occlusion is the most expensive one, and they get exponentially cheaper the more cascades you have. Here is the implementation of the same technique in 2D. So the previous one, I always implement these like highly experimental, 90% gonna fail techniques in my like test bed pet engine. But then I implemented in PoE. So this is again Glowing Ranger classic, lighting the scene with only indirect light. I should have probably mentioned this before, but calculating light from emissive surfaces is computationally equivalent to calculating light from directly lit surfaces. It's basically the same thing for a GI. That's why it's very typical to test global illumination algorithms by just having emissive objects. This implementation that we have in game uses screen space information. It uses screen space probes, but actually it can also be used in for other games. It might be more appropriate to use the same hierarchy of cascades in world space. And this demo that I also posted on my channel actually does just that. It has no screen space information. It's fully world space information, which means that it can calculate light sources behind the camera, which we don't have in PoE, which we don't need to worry about. By the way, this technique, since it basically allows encoding light reaching every point from every direction, we can also use it to calculate specular, so basically reflections. So here you see one of the dungeons basically made of mirror materials. We can calculate specular GI the same way. Here is the same thing. You can see the highlights on the curtain from like a porcelain-like material that has a specular part in its lighting model. Here is another example of specularly lit scene. And here's an example of a combined diffuse plus specular in-game. This implementation is even faster than our previous one. So basically, all global illumination solutions converge to the same result. Because the correct result is known. That's why I'm not even showing you side-by-side comparison, because if two global illumination algorithms are correct, they should produce the same image. The question is how quickly they produce this image. And this algorithm just scales so much better than everything else I've ever seen. It scales even better than our previous one, even though the previous one was pretty good, honestly. So yeah, this property of absolute double dipping and double exponentials when each cascade captures twice more rays for twice less speed is a totally OP exploit in reality. And you are the first audience to learn about it. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope we have some time for Q&A from Octavian here.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
Yes, there's a QR code up behind me right now, so if you've got any questions, be sure to scan that and send them in. I'll be vetting them as they come, but until then, I've got a couple questions as well. So you mentioned during the talk a few times about like what other game companies might do or what other games are doing. In the course of your work, have you just like developed an eye for being able to see like, oh, they're using this technique or that technique, or do you actually, have you asked people in the industry?
Thanks. That's a good question. I like it. The way it works is when I just started working graphics programming, I was obviously curious. I always looked like at what other games do. But over time, you absolutely do develop an eye. You just see the same things over and over. Like, I'm playing Monster Hunter, and I'm immediately seeing how they're doing their fur. Of course, they're doing it in screen space. I just naturally move it to the edge of my screen, and it produces the artifact that every screen space fur should produce. And I'm like, ah.
So can you play games normally anymore? Or is
cannot. Play Elden Ring, and I try to get under every rat to see it from the nastiest angle possible.
All right, we've got some questions coming in. The first one here is something that you'll probably understand more than me. Do you have to vary the number of cascades for different levels or geometries?
Say it again, please.
Do you have to vary for global illumination? Do you have to vary the number of cascades based on the level or geometry present?
So the thing about that algorithm is the cascades are always put in a fixed grid. The grid hierarchy is completely fixed. It's independent of the scene complexity. I should have mentioned that, but the cost of that algorithm is completely constant. Whatever happens on your screen, if you have one fireball on your screen or 1 million fireballs on your screen, it doesn't matter. The cost of that technique is absolutely constant. So it can never dip your FPS in a heat of battle. It has a constant technique, has a constant cost of about like 1 millisecond or something like that.
All right, next question. Do you feel you have an advantage by using our own bespoke engine versus something off the shelf?
Yes.
That, that's might have more documentation to it or something?
Yes. Probably worth mentioning that we have our fully custom engine that we have implemented for our own purposes, right? Because our game is not a general... We don't need to implement an engine that allows to implement any other game. We are implementing an engine that specifically supports our game with our own limitations, with our own things that we can exploit. For example, fixed camera, right? We never have to calculate lights that are behind us because there's no lights behind us. That's why our global illumination solution can work perfectly fine in screen space, because all the lights that you care about are on your screen. And yes, since we are developing our own engine, we have kind of personal attachment to it, and it's also why it's much easier for us to modify it, and it just feels natural for us to be working so closely with it.
You mentioned towards the end of the talk having a video of one of your techniques on your YouTube channel. People want to know what the channel is in case they can go check it out and find some interesting stuff.
I'm sure somebody will put that in the show captions. But yes, usually if you want to see like sneak peeks into stuff that has a non-zero chance to end up in PoE, you can follow my channel where I usually post all these experiments. Like all these 2D GI experiments were posted like way before they actually ended up in game. I was just playing with it. I was just trying things. Like they had a very high chance to not work out, but it's fine.
Are there any remaining parts of Path of Exile's renderer that are expensive or annoy you? So sort of like the GI problem, you said it kept you up at night. Anything else that's keeping you
GI
up at
is
night?
absolutely the hardest, computationally hardest problem that I'm aware of in computer graphics, period. There is nothing harder than GI.
Okay, and we've solved it better than anyone else, would you say?
That is my belief.
It's a big question.
I do believe that our solution has properties that no other solution has, and I have never seen anything even similar to this. If you have, let me know.
Well, actually, this runs into the previous question. Besides the light occlusion, what's another technique you're proud of implementing into Path of Exile?
Well, honestly, just watching the trailer felt unexpectedly emotional for me because, like, I put my finger onto literally any point on the screen, and there is something I contributed here. Like, whether it is a lighting model, or there is like a fog here, or I'm extremely ashamed of specular aliasing that I see here, or like there is some personal thing in every pixel of the game for me. So, yes, I do feel proud that we got there, but I also feel kind of sometimes ashamed, like I hope they don't notice this thing.
Come on, you've done excellent work. You showed examples of layering techniques on 2D planes and some 3D simple shapes, but what do you do if there's, say, a character model which is immersed in water or fire or something else like that?
Well, if a character model is immersed, well, we usually try to make it so that it doesn't explode in a really bad way. Like, the interaction between some of these techniques is sometimes questionable, which sometimes pops up in like nasty ways when, for example, somebody decides to make an MTX that turns the player into water, and of course nobody expected this, and now we have to deal with it.
Yeah. How do you/Grinding Gear Games decide which technical innovations to treat as trade secrets versus share openly in a talk?
I don't think there is anything that we keep secret, at least until like a big announcement like this. Like, because we want to make like a bigger announcement out of it on ExileCon rather than if some of it like got leaked in some sense. But honestly, we are perfectly fine with people sharing their progress when it's something to do with technical aspects of the game, when it doesn't have to do with like plot or like spoilers. But with technical aspects, we are actually free to share how we do things. Like, people that have been following my channel, they knew what was happening with the GI from like half a year ago. I just was progressively posting how the algorithm developed.
This niche little channel that...
Yeah, it's a pretty niche channel, but I'm kind of proud of it. I use like this is my portfolio.
Let's see, what's the next one? Do you have any render features you wish you got to build, but Path of Exile just doesn't need because of our very bespoke system?
If there was such feature, I wouldn't be talking right now, I would be programming. So there is some feature that I could say like, well, I wish our game suited for these features better, right? Like, I wish we had TAA so that we would have nicer anti-aliasing, but we don't have a TAA, not because we are lazy or not because we don't know how to make it happen. It's just because our game is really dynamic, and TAA really breaks down when you have a really dynamic game. So
we're just too good for that system.
Well, sure.
You got to phrase it, or you got to spin it.
Yeah, like some people do come and like, well, you just should have implemented this thing, but often the answer is like, we don't have this thing because of this and this reason, and this is just the way it is.
Yes, he's a smart man. He did think of that. Have you hit any interesting problems supporting both PoE 1 and 2 on the same engine?
Yeah. There is some like scaling. I'm just thinking of what I should be talking about here, because this can have some implications. But like, yes, because PoE 1, well, for example, if PoE 2 had textures that had resolution just twice higher, right? Like from 512 by 512 to 124 by 124, what's the difference? Well, the difference is actually 4 times more memory, right? So like the challenges with increasing just texture resolution are pretty obvious because you increase the resolution of textures twice and it uses 4 times more memory. So like supporting engines that need to deal with typical 512 textures versus 1024 textures is just, yeah, that's quite different. But we do want to apply as much of the tech that we develop for PoE 2 for PoE 1 as well, whenever possible.
And sort of leading off that, are we going to be using these methods in PoE 1 now with the recent engine update patch?
The GI is not going to be in this engine patch. but we are thinking about it. Just because it's such a huge change, we were, I guess, decided to not ship it with a whole bunch of other changes that are also very impactful. Like they're going to change the way engine behaves quite a bit, and I just didn't feel confident enough of shipping this GI solution right now.
Do it in waves, so you don't rock the boat quite too much. Which is more common? Do artist creations drive the need for new rendering tech, or does rendering tech enable artists to have more freedom with what they make?
That's another good question. It's both.
They've got a lot of good questions.
It's both. So I should have mentioned that, well, a lot of these effects are not my doing. I just enable other people to create art using the techniques that I make. I don't actually create art myself. So everything that looks good on these images is like created by our effects artists.
I mean, it's still as much your
However,
doing as anyone.
I should also, well, that's kind of an interesting point that, in my opinion, global illumination looks beautiful just on itself. You don't need any artistic talent to create a scene that looks beautiful, because realistic lighting, in my opinion, just is beautiful. So if you manage to create lighting that behaves in a realistic way, it will look beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks great, and my job is staring at the game all day, so.
Thank you.
Aside from other games, where do you learn about these sorts of techniques? You mentioned there are some publications and such, articles.
Well, I guess you live and learn. Learn something every day. There is actually, well, my background is physics, right? I studied physics. This is the primary thing that drives my passion, right? But how is physics related to graphics? Well, the answer is programming graphics is programming physics, because programming graphics is programming the behavior of light. Light obeys physical laws. So just studying physics is directly translated into being able to program graphics. If you're really good at physics, you will be able to program graphics. Of course, like there is like tricks and stuff, but that's usually that you just pick up all the time. Also, like just playing other games is very useful to, like, hey, how did they do this thing? And you just start learning, start digging until you understand how.
So if somebody wanted your job, they should get a physics degree and play a lot of video games. Absolutely,
physics degree is the most important thing if you want to get to graphics programming. Yes, that's the most important thing.
I'm halfway there. What are some of the other techniques that you've developed that are in the game that you wish artists would use more?
That's a little bit embarrassing. But
oh, okay.
Yeah, when artists saw these slides, like, we had this? Like, yeah, some of these techniques are kind of hard to adopt by artists. Like, it takes some dedication, like fields, right? Like well, it's a lot of scrolling, I'm not going to show that again, but like fields is a very powerful technique, but it just requires like some doing to get used to using it. It's not like a very straightforward thing. It's like a different way of looking at your effects. It requires some level of attention. And some artists sometimes just don't have time. Like one VFX artist had the time, learned fields, now they're good at this, but other VFX artists can just fall behind. And the technique can get kind of lost because of this, which is sad. But yeah, this happens all the time.
So we are low on time here, so I'm just going to go for one more question. Do any isometric optimizations need to be changed when capturing trailer footage specifically?
Oh, that's a whole thing.
Well, I'm glad we went with that as the last question.
Yeah, you have a guy who does most of the filming, and I have a lot of issues coming specifically from him. When the game breaks down in terrible ways, when you just put camera at an angle where it never was supposed to be. Yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah, generally players are not zooming in quite that far or doing advanced camera work.
Yeah, like when players say something like, why don't you just put the camera horizontally? Or like, why don't we have more cinematics? Well, because a lot of assets are really not designed to be looked at different angles from the angle you observe them in the game.
All right, I think that is just about our time, though.
Thank you, Octavian, for your questions.
Yeah, and thank you all for sending them in and
for listening. I hope you found it interesting or at least entertaining. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hey. What's good, kids? What's good? Hey, that was what's that? How good was that, guys? Hey. How good was that? Was that fucking Poke Champion? Fucking rendering and shit. What the fuck mix coming through? I did not get kicked out. Okay. I did not get kicked out. Fuck off. This table sucks. You can see where I'm operating at, chat. This one's not as good as my previous setup, let me tell you. I've not kicked out. What I just did was what just happened was I just sprint. I literally so far I've had a shower, got changed, put on new clothing, put my shit on, and then during that I was watching the whole fucking thing. Mate, 2D global illumination, holy immense stuff, that all that shit's. Then I sent Abby down. She made some food, and I ran down to the fucking table, smashed back food, and that was like a fucking 7 minutes. And then as he was ending, I ran back up so I can make it summarize it. Well, basically, this PoE guy is the fucking 5-head dude, and he's making all these sick fucking special effects, and the cunt's just leaking it out. And just leaking all the trade secrets to all the incompetent companies. And D4 is bad. Yeah, basically said D4 is bad. We don't need to worry about lighting coming from behind the character because D4 bad. That's what it was. Quit the shit. There's was apologizing previously, but secretly I was thinking to have a child-free breakfast. Wow, she's shit posting in Discord right now after I fucking. Okay, I felt bad because Abby. Okay, I felt bad because Abby picked the big table, right? Abby picked the big table like a Giga Chad because I guess in the other days literally everyone came down, right, to this one big table. And for whatever reason, I guess everyone went out last night and nobody's there at 7, so. She's at the big table, and I was there with her, but then I just left her at the big table by herself. Sad. But there's Ziggy D came in, and his baby and his wife and all that. So maybe Abby should go chill with them. Abby should go chill with those guys because babies and shit. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? Holy shit. We have so much shit to talk about, brothers. We have so much shit to talk about. There's some let me tell you that I found out some shit. To be fair, the shit that I'm about to talk about is about to be talked about anyway. Bosses and monsters of PoE2. So, yeah. Wait, bosses and monsters and then when's the currency one? When's the currency one, boys? It's like real soon. Path of Exile. Okay. Yeah, the logout macro. Shut the fuck up about the logout macro. God damn it, man. Holy shit. I'm seeing supporter packs. I'm unable to see the fucking ExileCon schedule, kid. Jesus Christ. Exile. Yo, you should see me at the fucking breakfast cafe there, boys. I was fucking such a DJ. I'd pour coffee in, pour milk in. I would chug the entire cup back, standing there. Pour coffee in, pour milk in. Chug the entire cup back, standing there. Just fucking back to back to back. Because, to be fair, their cups are the most pathetic fucking things you've ever seen. They're the most pathetic fucking things you've ever seen. I'm talking like the most dog shit ass cups. The drops. Yeah, the drops are still going. Really, you can win some wings or some shit, right? But you don't type drops. You just press F5 and then click the fucking thing at the top, bro. 30% coffee. Well, no, not 30% coffee. I like 70 to 30 ratio. That's what I prefer, I'm not kicked out. I'm absolutely not kicked out, bro. Dude, mate, do you know how many staff members I interacted with yesterday that fucking love me? Okay. Like 5. It's like 5. So, 70% coffee, 30%. To be fair, I think I smashed too much. Oh shit, I need to start smashing my supplements actually as well. While I've got food in my stomach. Yeah, I need to start smashing my drugs. Wait, what did he say? Did you... Oh, yes, I played Path of Exile as well. Yes. So. Oh, I played Path of Exile.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll get into, just briefly explain what we're going to be doing. Very unrehearsed. We're taking a bit of a different approach with this one, and what's going to be happening is I got Octavian over here playing. Instead of putting up slides with text and pictures of the bosses, we're just going to demo them live as I talk about them. Later on in the talk, if anyone's willing to test their might, we will be. We've got some stairs installed. We'll get people to raise their hand. You can come on stage if I pick you, and we will let you fight the boss. If you succeed, or let's say do well enough, I got some merch over there to give you. And then obviously Q&A at the end if we have time, but if fighting bosses is more entertaining, then we can just keep that going. I'm going to move around a lot, sorry to the lighting team, I like to pace. If I do any dancing like I did the last ExileCon that people made GIFs out of, feel free to update them. I have lost a lot of weight, as some people have known, and I would like to have some updated GIFs about that. Thank you very much. So to get into bosses and monsters, well, as seen from the earlier trailer, we have a good 100 bosses, one per area. We're very, except for towns, obviously. So, well, we could put bosses in towns. No bosses in towns yet. So we've got 100 bosses, one in every area, and that's not even talking about endgame. Don't you worry what's going to happen there. We never cease to have our fair share of pinnacle bosses, and obviously the same bosses will reappear in maps and a later topic. As for monsters, we've got 600 distinct monsters with different skills, looks, names, abilities, everything. Every area has a completely different feel to every other area. It is amazing to play through. It feels very, very fresh every time you travel to different areas. You're not getting a lot of the stale repetition. Now, obviously, skeletons appear in more than one zone and whatnot, so it's not completely all unique in every single area. But for those who have played the demo, you can today you can see what we've got. Now, making bosses is probably my pride point of working being a game designer. It is the thing I'm most proud of, and the thing I enjoy the most. I like to see them kill people, including myself earlier. It's fine. I practiced that a lot. It's fine. It went good. That was not on purpose, just in case anyone was aware. That was a genuine accident. I did die. It did kill me. I'm not good enough. It's fine. Anyway, so we've got Octavian here. We've got, again, very little rehearsals. I'm pretty much just going to be telling him what I think we should fight, kind of picking them somewhat at random. I'm going to be going through slides and back a whole bunch, but there's nothing to really see but a game client up there. I've just got some this one just says intro numb monsters. That's all it says, so winging it. All right, so we're going to have Octavian go to fight Krutog, who is in the Volcanic Warrens in Act 4. Act 4 is my favorite act for bosses, and the reason being is that you can travel to all these different islands. So as for most acts, they have a consistent theme. So you've got Act 3 being very Val and jungle. You've got Act 2 being very desert Marrakech. You've got Act 1 being the Ezomite and the Gothic horror. Act 4 it has the Karui consistency through and hints of it, but every island is just a different biome. So you get this high diversity of different kinds of bosses, and that's really cool, and monsters for that matter, and that's really, really cool to me. Feel free, go for it. I'll talk about it as well. I'll try and get out of the way just a little bit. This is Krutog, the Lord of Kin. Some of you might have already gotten to him in the demos. And we've got Octavian here playing on the warrior. There might be bugs, things might go wrong. It's completely live. Okay, so in terms of context, just a bit of story. This guy is this. You can tell he's massive, right? He's a big dude, and what's going on here is that there are these goblin kin that are inhabiting the island, and these goblin see him as a god figure, just because he's so massive. And they bring him, if you play through the areas, you can see all the goblins, the goblin-esque, I think they're called kin, kind of this tall kind of thing. And because he's so big, they just see him as a god and they worship him, and they want to make him happy, and so they bring him, monsters, they bring him humans, they bring him like playthings, and they also bring him food. They're bringing things to him that they think will make him happy, and he's just like, I'm living the good life. I'm sitting here on my throne in this warm area getting brought playthings, and so you can see he's got a suit of armor that's made out of human corpses, and when you start the fight and you first initially approach him, he's actually got two humans in his hands kind of playing and going at each other like they're dolls. And it's, to you, you're just a plaything to him. And you get a lot of this with this mechanic exactly going on right here, where he's trying to stomp you. You're just a bug to him. He's just trying to squish you. This fight is pretty relatively difficult as melee, but it's alright. We're not expecting anyone to succeed first attempt. In terms of mechanics, another thing is that they like to bring him sulfite to eat, the goblins. And you can see this, he's done this already in the fight, where he walks over and he goes and picks up some of that sulfite and eats it. And this unlocks two new abilities that he's doing now. One is the just burp. He does a big burp and lets out a wave of partial chaos, partial lightning damage, because it's electrified voltaxic sulfite. And Nico would probably love to find this island, but he hasn't quite yet. We have to find the sulfite. He's just, not. If he found it, he wouldn't need us. So don't tell him about it. As for the other mechanic, he does a big vomit, and it creates a growing puddle of degen, and which he can do two, so there can be two active at once, and obviously that creates more pressure, makes it harder, more claustrophobia, which I like to have in these fights. So now when he's trying to stomp you, you've got a lot less maneuverability. Now, in terms of some interesting things, from a tech standpoint. Good attempt. Oh, good. I'll have a quick, just a bit more. You can start it again. I'll just a bit more rant about this guy. But one thing in particular he has, which you can see in a lot of the boss fights, is he is very large. Now, this was very difficult in PoE 1, and you'll notice that most of our very large bosses, are stationary. So Katava's a good example. He cannot move. Arakali's another one. They cannot move. And that's because we have, in PoE 1, we have one central hitbox to an entity, and it's a square. And increasing that has complexities with things like pathfinding. But it does cause things where if you have that and it has a maximum size, you can't have a boss too large in PoE 1 that can move. Now, if they're stationary, we can make the thing larger because it doesn't need to pathfind. Technical limitations, or more so it's for optimization's sake. Now, what you can notice on this guy, or what we've done, is we've actually given him multiple hitboxes. He doesn't have a central hitbox. He has one on each leg, which means when you target him, it will try and hit the closest one. It will run up and hit his leg. And this is cool. We've done this on a lot of bosses, and it's allowed us to have much, much larger bosses, and it just amplifies the epicosity big time. But yeah, and it also creates this thing where when he is stomping, it's pretty hard to have a look, but you can actually kind of dodge roll between his legs. He doesn't have an actual collider in his central thing, which again, all PoE 1 bosses are collision in the middle, so you can't run through the direct center of them. But we get to have some freedom to do that here, which is really cool. We can also have it that on some bosses, if, for example, if we were to redo Katava, if he has a thing where he has obviously the skill where he buries his hand in the ground, we could activate a hitbox there so you can then just hit his arm. This is something we would be able to do now, we couldn't do before. So yeah, ultimately what I wanted to also show with this one is just, like, this isn't an axe boss. He looks epic. He's just mid-act. He's just a one of, 18 or so bosses, or however, whatever the math ends up being there. Bosses just located in Act 4. Now he's considered a bit slightly higher tier because he's at the end of a couple of areas, but so he's more than, like, say, the quadrilla monster I fought during the keynote. He's one tier up from that. But yeah, very epic. One other thing I wanted to talk about, which I was hoping to be able to see, but I haven't been paying enough attention, is, and it was in the last talk, you saw it probably during the keynote, if you were there, you can now stun bosses. You can freeze bosses. We also have a mechanic called Electrocute coming, which allows lightning damage to do longer duration stun as well. Stun. Crowd control, I should say. Now we've done custom heavy stun animations for all these bosses with various lengths. So this guy's is quite long. If you heavy stun him, he's probably going to be down for probably 6 seconds. That's complete. Nice. That's it's all right. We'll move on to the next one anyway. Just what do we give a go here? We can go to the Blind Beast. Give it a go. Same character. Saves you having to swap. For stunning, so you can stun these things, they get stunned for 6 seconds. But in other cases, we've got bosses that get stunned for 3 seconds. And others, we can have it be stunned for 10 seconds. We get to completely control, heavy stunned, I should say. We get to completely control that now. And we can say this one gets stunned twice as often or half as often. And so because we get to do all that, certain heavy stun has certain value on some bosses than on others. So an example of this actually is this boss, the Blind Beast. Now this is in the area before what we just fought. We probably should have fought them in the opposite order, but it's all right. This one's easier, for sure. It is. You'll see the goblins I was talking about earlier around the edge of the arena. These are the ones that worship the Krutog that we just had before. Now this arena of theirs, they bring people in here. So these goblins like to tame beasts. If you play in the area, you can see them riding on top of these big beasts and they jump off when you get near them. Pretty cool mechanic. But in this case, this one was untamable. They couldn't control it. So they put it in an arena. They built an arena and they bring people here to fight against it and to test their might and to see if they're strong enough while they're all cheering. Now, if you do happen to defeat it, they all get a bit scared and shocked and they all just flee and they're gone. Because now to you, you're very intimidating. Now the rest of the level, they'll still fight you because they didn't get to see you fight it, but very dodgeable. Again, you've got another mechanic here. It's very just hard hits, heavy slams. You'll notice some knockback on some of the stuff. He's got that skill that creates 3, what do we call them? Abyss cracks, I guess. And then slams and it causes damage along them and that creates degen for a duration. What else about this one? So this one, his heavy stun animation, which just happened there. So that was his heavy stun. Now this one's not quite long, but it gives you enough opportunity for him to do the channeled, the heavy impact skill he just had. His one is not very long, but he gets heavy stun twice as frequently as other bosses. So you have less time to utilize the heavy stun, but you have more opportunities to do something if you're able to. Now, one other thing about this boss, which we can say it at the end, but you'll notice it happened in the keynote as well, is that they drop consumable quest items, so they're consumable items that give permanent bonuses to characters. So the first time you kill them, a lot of bosses in the campaign do it. This one in particular, I believe, drops a soaked bile-soaked skill book or something, but it gives +5 to all attributes permanently to that character. There are many throughout the whole campaign. Not every single boss drops one, but we have different rewards. Another thing that happens with bosses in PoE 2 is the first time you kill them, they will have much higher, and this is actually something Diablo 2 did, they will have much higher rarity and better drops. So you're really incentivized to explore throughout the campaign, find all the bosses and kill them for both permanent bonuses and for much better items. This is something that will hopefully promote not skipping so much of the random mini bosses. Like there's always the question of, once you know what you're doing, should you kill Fire Fury? Well, I don't know how many people here do. I don't think I ever do. But we really want it to be now that you feel like you've missed out on something if you skip it. Well, it's gone a bit rough here, but
Why did you talk about
we're good.
How long it takes?
Oh, good. Anyway, if you
Why
would
doesn't he talk
have
about
killed
it's
him, he would have
taking,
dropped
like, 10 minutes?
probably a quest item that you would be able to use and get a permanent bonus.
What's that about?
We're going to try a very difficult one now. Sorry. You know what it is, the Siren boss.
0 out of 2.
Don't worry, it's all right. It's all right. Again, not practiced, and that's fine. Like, hopefully it makes everyone, I assume a lot of people have been out there having a pretty rough time with the demos if they've been playing it, but don't feel too bad. It is hard for everyone, and it's easy to make mistakes, easy to die. Now this boss, don't worry about him warping into the water there. You're going to just see some stuff that we do behind the scenes. Otherwise he's going to have to clear through all the levels manually, and it's going to take, I mean, my talk will be over and he wouldn't have even got here yet. Now, what do we got to talk about on this one is, well, I'll give some context again, just for interest's sake. So this is Diamora, the siren of the Song of Death. She's a siren in the cave. You obviously get some Mervale vibes straight off the bat, but it is pretty much a modern-day enhanced Mervale. And what she does is turns people to stone. This one's rough. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, Octavian. She turns people to stone, and so as you're going through the level and you see the above area, you'll see heaps of people, petrified people who have come here. So people have tried to inhabit this island that is above. She's actually on the tropical island in the caves underneath it, or towards the ocean front.
You can't even get through the
and
ears.
she turns people to stone, and what's happened here is that she'll eat them. But as such, we've got a petrify mechanic, which you haven't yet seen. I don't know if we'll be able to get her that far into this fight. It is brutal, this one. Now, one thing that happened with this one is if we were able to show the phase, she has a petrify mechanic where she jumps into the water, goes into the middle, comes up, and she's just radiating gold. And she's cursed. She wants people to be able to look at her. She's trying to find the one that can resist the petrification. And you can't. You're not the one. And so she'll turn you to stone, and that's during a whole minion phase. But we have one mechanic where mirrors would be spawning periodically around the edge of the arena. This isn't in now, it's been removed since, and it was just incomprehensible. You're getting turned to stone from all directions, but the idea was that if you look at her, you turn to stone, and as these walls of water that come up that reflect that, if you look at that, you also get turned to stone. But then they would spawn periodically, and what I wanted people to do was to move clockwise or counterclockwise around the arena at a fixed pace. And if you overshoot the time, you will end up lapping yourself, and now you've got mirrors in every direction and you've failed. So you have to move at say 25 degrees per some time slot, unbalanced, so I don't know the exact numbers. Now, we removed that because it was just no one could tell where they were being petrified from or what to do. It was too complicated. Now, that's normally fine to do it in-game. Pinnacle content to have something kind of complicated like that. People will find it frustrating, people will find it stressful, and others will find it challenging and something to learn, something to keep fighting until they learn it. And those are two completely fine demographics to target. But when it's going to be progression blocking like that, all of a sudden you've got this just boss where it's stopping 50% of players in their tracks completely, and it's not like you can kind of gear to brute force it in that case, because Petrified's a pretty hard block mechanic.
Zoom in.
You might be able to survive it maybe with enough gear, but honestly, pretty improbable. So we removed it from here, and it is kind of my hope that when we re-add it to in-game, we can revisit that mechanic and see if we do it depending on where it falls in and whatnot, or we'll take the same mechanic, apply it somewhere else. But ultimately, so there's this phase going on here. He's fighting the minions that are spawning during it, but he has to kind of always be having, I think it's 120 degree vision cone, as long as he's not. The chills are rough. As long as he's not looking at her for too long, he should generally be fine, but the minions are pretty brutal. And that gets onto another thing, which is that minion phases, well, you do not gain flash charges for killing normal monsters anymore.
It's so bad.
You only gain them for killing rares and magics and uniques. However, so this is purely downside. These minions are now just, it's a challenge. It's not a, refresh my life pool infinitely. Yep, so he's finished one petrification phase. He's doing pretty good, actually. Long fights, as you can see. It's not intended to be this long. We will have to adjust your life, among other things. Put some cooldowns on some stuff. There's more iteration to be done. Always more iteration to be done to get these right. However, it's in a pretty good state. Flash charges, though, going back to that. Well, tangentially, we have checkpoints, which you saw me revive at in the keynote, if you saw that, where you're just outside the boss. It is a new instance. You start the fight from scratch. However, the checkpoint restores your flash charges, fully heals you, and all of that.
He's got no life.
If he needs flasks right now, it is our expectation that he finds an opportunity to town portal, which he just did. You'll notice it has an animation. During boss fights, you now have I want to say that's about 2.5 to 3 seconds, but I don't remember the exact thing. It is normally instant, only if you're in a boss fight. Do you do it? Does it have a cast time like that? The other thing is that in order to stop people from just creating them during emerge sequences and all that, the moment they become hostile, all portals in their arenas are destroyed. We really want... I'll tell you what's disheartening is when you make Katava and you go and see the world firsts, of which some of you might even be here who did this, and you're literally using 40 portal scrolls to fight, going, oh, he's doing a skill, portal to town, portal back in, sit in grace period. And there are other ways to do this, but it's pretty disheartening to see. So we're working to make you really actually have to fight the boss, have to engage the boss, have to deal with these things. If you were to Alt F4 right now, don't do it, but if you were to Alt F4 right now and log back in, you will be exactly where you logged off, in the exact same state, and the boss will still. So if you're about to get slammed and you log out macro, it does not save you. You will be logging back in, and that boss will be paused, and the moment you move, that slam hits, you will die. So the checkpoints, yes, you have to start the fight from scratch if you die. Pretty brutal, but it means we can't be too complicated with them. We can't be too difficult, except until later. It obviously gets progressively difficult, but it means more so we have to be more accurate with the balance. If you misbalance it, so many people are going to just hit a wall and they're going to have to stop playing. And that's very, very brutal. And I mean misbalance in the difficult direction, not the easy direction. That will be very brutal, and it will be not good. Now, that's still kind of the same in PoE 1, but the other thing that's super disheartening to see is people just die, revive, cast a few more skills, die, revive, cast a few more skills, die, revive. Like, it is just like, it's just brutal. And then you don't learn anything, you don't gear for any of it, you just keep doing it. And then you get to the next boss, and you're probably not good enough to do that one either, and so you do it again and again. And it's effectively, you're having a rough time. So this is the second petrification phase here. This phase is much harder because on top of the ads, you've now got these rotating drowning orbs, which behave the same way as they do in the Eater of Worlds fight, where they will straight up kill you after X seconds of being inside of them. They slow you as well. So you've got all those orbiting in various lanes, counterclockwise and clockwise, while you're having to deal with the minions. Just an example of escalation, but this fight is certainly way too hard right now. But if anyone manages to defeat it in the demo, honestly, good on you. It is doable, but it is pretty brutal. There's a lot of portals, so hopefully you can do it. One other thing about the portals, if you take damage while doing that cast, it is interrupted. You don't get to just execute it with ease. But 2.5 second windows are pretty frequent, so it's not actually impossible. Alright, let's go check out another boss, shall we? Don't worry about this one anymore. I reckon Bog Witch is pretty cool. Again, we're looking at these bosses and they have a pretty damn epic. They kind of stand out.
0 out of 3.
They are not act bosses. Our act bosses are a whole nother tier. Generally, we escalate phases, mechanics, and introductions, and of course, they have just an epicosity in terms of dialogue and storytelling. But we've even upped that. We have specific character reactions to bosses, character comments. They talk about them, they comment on them. All the different characters say different things based on their backgrounds. Heaps of a lot more kind of on-the-fly storytelling, which is real cool with respect to these. All right, so now we've got the Bog Witch, also pretty difficult. This is actually the last area of the Act 3 demo, but I'm not sure how many people are going to get there. She is a witch, and right now she's, as you can see, doing some broomstick flying around.
Oh, shit.
A little bit more horrific than that. So her first main phase, what she's doing now, is using bone magic. She is summoning bone walls and exploding those bone walls. This phase isn't too much of a threat. Maybe.
What the fuck is that damage, bro?
Maybe not, relative to the second phase. But yeah, as you can see, she is doing a lot of this bone, summoning walls. Now, once you damage her enough, during this phase, or once she's reached a certain life threshold, she's actually going to, oh, brutal. It's all right, try again. Feel free to just remove some life from her if you want to shortcut it, just so we can show it off. Or you can do it legit. It's up to you. You got 24 minutes, though.
What's the CD? What's the CD?
So she changes phase mid-fight. So once you've done enough damage to her, she will actually face plant off the broomstick. The broomstick will snap. And then she's like, well, all right, I'll just use my fire magic that she's good at. She'll light all the effigies on the edge of the arena on fire, and then she'll be able to siphon fire magic from them to do fire magic. So you go from two different, very distinct styles of magic or spells in this fight, and it creates a whole different, phase, which is pretty fun. Hopefully if we get that far, I can talk about some of the mechanics behind that one. Yeah, good luck. All right, let's just give him a go for a minute here. Let him concentrate a little bit.
Wait, did he use hacks?
Just want to see you get her to phase 2.
Let's see.
No pressure.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God.
It took one of our designers, Jason, a lot of work to get her to do that kind of drifting vibe as she comes to change.
Oh.
So that mechanic, okay, here we go. We've got some fire magic going on. So that one you just saw, she creates 2 walls on either side of the player in line with an effigy and then siphons the fire from the effigy to her. But interestingly, what you can notice here, you can see the fire actually splits at her, sending damage that way. So not only running to the sides is safe, standing directly behind her makes you safe. It can be sometimes hard to maneuver into that exact position, however. You can see there is a cone behind her that is a safe zone. Otherwise, she's got fireball, she's got flamethrower, she's still got some bone magic, which is apparently rough.
Bozo.
But yeah, anyway, moving on again. Mastodon Necromancer, I reckon. I'm saying internal names, by the way. I have no idea what they're called in the demo right now. I honestly forget. So I think that one was called the Duke Witch or something. Pronunciation to be determined. So this one's in Act 2 on the Huntress. This is in the Mastodon Badlands.
Jesus.
Bone Pits, I think, is the second area. Here we go. So you've got these necromancers here. Again, more bone magic. And they summon this giant. We've shown this one off in the old Act 2 gameplay trailer, however long ago that was. Won't be fighting this one for too long, but because we'll move on, not because you'll necessarily win or lose. But what this one brings to the table, or the difficulties or complexities of this one, is when you've got a twin fight, how do you make it that once you kill one, it isn't just completely boring and trivial? And so that's what we had originally, have a good fight when there's both of them, and then the moment you kill one, it's just like, well, now I'm dealing with half. You never want a boss fight to just become, unless you've done an interesting mechanic to temporarily get ease out of the fight, we don't want it to be that you just all of a sudden have, a half-paced fight, and it's like, oh, it's fine from here out. The fight should get harder, they should escalate, they should get more difficult, and that is what we had to accomplish here. So when he dies, he leaves, like, his energy is still linked to the Mastodon, so he remains, and he does his magic still from his corpse, and it would use this kind of mechanic, but they'll be moving throughout the arena, so it adapts. When the Mastodon dies, the Necromancer just completely gets a bit angry, or he takes back his power from what he infused into the Mastodon, and he amplifies all of his skills. So his lightning strikes hit differently, his meteors hit differently, different patterns, different distributions. Now, that means getting both to as low health as possible together and killing them at the same time is one strategy. If you find it is easier to deal with a buffed Mastodon, then killing the Necro first is easier. And if you find it's easier dealing with a buffed Necro, entirely based on your playstyle, your build, your skills, you have those three decisions of what decision to make in order to make life easier for yourself. Sometimes it is hard to make those decisions on the fly, but if you go in there with, say you attempt and then you go in for another attempt, you can easily make that decision, and you can go, I'm going to focus DPS on one or the other. Just let this play out a little bit as well. I'm going to talk about another one while this is happening. It might be a bit weird, but we're not going to show it, there's no need. And that is just, interestingly, the hardest boss in the game to balance so far has been the first boss in Act 1. Every single day, some game system changes. A player skill changes, a new mechanic is added, like all of a sudden there's heavy stun to deal with, all of a sudden something. And so you've got this thing where you're working chronologically through areas, and you start with this one boss, and I probably wouldn't be surprised if we've had to rebalance that first boss over 500 times in order to make it feel right. And you don't know you're going to come up with a new mechanic the next day, you just it just happens. And so then all of a sudden character balance changes in such a way, or a unique monster life or stun ability or something changes, and all of a sudden you've got to rebalance everything you've already done. It can be quite taxing, but what it results in is you often want to leave things, not 100%, because they'll become 70% a week later or less. In terms of how, well done. All right, so you can see now from this, going back to this fight here that Octavian's doing, you can see now there's a new mechanic introduced, which is there is both a moving kind of bullet hell style projectile sphere, as well as what we call volatiles, which are the orbs chasing him that will explode once they make proximity. So fighting just the Mastodon is now harder because you have to deal with these two extra mechanics. But he's doing pretty well. We'll have a success here, I suspect. I believe. Going back to the Miller, it was actually the Swollen Miller as the first boss. It's been very, very, very hard to balance is one word, but lots of time spent on it. The other thing is we really don't want it to be that you can walk up to him and just hold down a button, not dodge a thing, not evade a thing, and survive. At one point we had only one life flask. Yes. Well done.
W.
At one point we had only one life flask, one mana flask. And without the normal monsters now giving flash charges back, we ended up deeming, and I mean on, not overall, I mean on the beach, what you start with. And what we learned is that often you will run out of flash. If you just stood there and held down attack, or whatever skill you have, you would run out of flash charges and life before you killed them, most of the time. And then all of a sudden we added another life flask back. And so now you're fighting the Miller, and now you can just go back to holding down one skill, never moving, never dodging, because as long as one of his skills cannot one-shot you, and the time between attacks is long enough that you can restore your life, then you're fine. You're never going to die as long as you have enough life flasks.
Do you want me to go fight Miller?
What do we want you to fight? Let's just show some prisoner for a moment here.
Joy.
But don't worry about it. No success needed.
It's a very cool boss. I just
want to show how cool it is more so than make sure you open all 3 of the doors. Get a little heist mini game before the boss.
Look, I'm back where I was when I logged out. You can demonstrate that.
It's because of all the cheats, though. All of a sudden we had another life flask to characters, and now people are just sitting there face tanking it until it dies again, and you never have to dodge. So we have to rebalance the boss yet again. It's either that or rebalance flasks, but then you have to determine which one. Well, one boss being rebalanced is far easier than rebalancing all flasks for every character. Obviously, you don't go with that one.
We wanted to show the doors, so I'm just clipping back to the doors.
Yeah, so this one has a cool epic lead-up where you've got a series of doors, and you're in the bottom of a prison. This prison was built around this boss. He is a regenerator. He cannot die. So what they would do is keep the boss in a perpetual state of drowning. It was actually our intention, and it may still happen, that this room he's about to go into is completely flooded with water, and when you open this door, the water drains out. And he was kept there just to make sure that he couldn't break free, because he cannot be killed, except for by the player, for some reason. But it's interesting in this one, he changes his 3 phases. He definitely sets a new bar, brutal. There are actually ballistae around the arena, and the first time you phase shift him, he will take a knee, and then you hit the ballista fires at him, and the spear goes, the big projectile, it's a big metal spike, goes into him, and he can pull that out, and now use it as a weapon. So there's phase change number 1. The second one, the second ballista, he will get shot and he will lose his entire arm. It will be gone. He will then kind of Dragon Ball Z Piccolo style grow a new one. And that arm is fresh and imbued with, like, his corpse is all rotted, so he doesn't get to use too much magic, just the cold magic from his like frozen organs. And now he regrows a fresh bloody arm, and he can now use blood magic, and then you've got phase 3, so he's both got a spear and blood magic going on. He's very difficult. Oh, nice heavy stun.
No. Damn it.
All good. So, my plan, as I said, it was pretty impromptu to just go through things. We've got about 13 minutes left, so I'm going to say we just skip straight to seeing if anyone wants to come up here and fight. It is not going to be if you succeed, you get some merch. I will just give you some merch anyway. However, it'll be one at a time. I'll ask people to raise their hand if they want. If no one wants to, we'll go to Q&A. It's fine. But I'd like to give some people to give it a shot. There's some hand sanitizer up here if you're feeling like you want it. You don't have to. It's up to you. We will pick the boss. Hard luck. But again, put on a show, and then you get the merch. It's all good. We just want to have this be fun and entertaining. All right, so that being said, let me just check there wasn't anything super critical I need to talk through. I'll talk over when people are fighting anyway.
Yo, he's not. This isn't live. This happened yesterday.
Does anyone, especially on the ground floor, if you're up there, you might want to move down if you want an attempt, but I can't see too well here, so I'll just pick whatever I can see. Oh, I see someone right there.
Oh,
yes,
I'm so dead.
You who stood up. Stairs are over here. Come give it a go. I saw a waving hand. It's very hard to see the rest.
Man, it's not live. How long until it starts go? I got it.
We'll do ones we've shown here a little bit. We'll give the Blind Beast a go on the
so it's 2
Warrior.
hours it starts.
That's not keep renaming that class, and I keep almost mispronouncing the other name. Welcome. Give it a go. Give it a go. So he's going to set you up. Go over there. He'll get you into the correct position on the correct class. Again, if you want to sanitize your hands, go for it. You can do it before or after. It's entirely up to you. And then give it a go and see what happens.
All right.
As soon as you started, I'll move on to some other topics.
Right through that menacing-looking gate there.
Remember, dodge roll, spacebar. Good luck.
Do better than me.
Impossible.
You got your war cry on W. You've got your sunder on R. Now this character has on right click it's called armor break. If you hit the boss 3 times in this case, it will break its armor. If you then sunder it, you will do an always crit at double damage. Oh my god!
Try again if you get a stun on him.
If you heavy stun him, feel free to open a portal.
Leap Slam does a ton of extra stun damage, by the way.
Okay. Oh, that's pretty good.
When he's armor broken, using the right click, if you hit him 3 times, the Sunder will do an always crit at double damage. E, which is the Leap Slam, will do a 1,000% or 500% more stun damage. So
I think it's 500.
This guy's 7 out of 7 for sure, guys.
I put the number in there, I should know.
Look at the focus here. Look at the focus.
When you do that, ideally you would then heavy stun him. What you can then do is immediately Warcry followed by a fully powered up channeled ground slam. And that should do a lot of damage.
Get him. Yeah, I tried the Q mechanic. It's like the fucking slowest attack in the universe. It's literally like a 5-second windup, bro, unironically.
There's your armor break, debuff represented under. Didn't stun him.
He's unstunnable during that spin.
Unstunnable?
So you have to time it correctly.
So once you stun something, it makes it very hard to stun them again for a duration.
That's cringe.
Once you kind of get the rhythm of that, it would be actually maybe better to use Sunder in some cases instead of using the Leap Slam, because you should know that he kind of can't be stunned for that time.
This is my experience.
Play more and more as to which skills you should use in which circumstances.
So you trying to blow it? Doesn't work. Can't blow it, bro.
That's right, you can do this damageless.
Nice.
Oh!
Nice. Just gotta get back to it.
Wait, doesn't he destroy the portals? I thought the portals get destroyed.
Nice.
Pop off, King. Pop off. Look like he's in the wall. He's in the wall. He's found a bug.
Nice.
Get in! Oh.
Remember to use the well.
Remember to use the well.
This guy's played the beta. This guy's clearly played the plate. He
Probably
did
only going to get one more attempt at this after this one, so...
Oh, shit.
As in one more person to try another boss.
Do QA. Chad, I didn't fight this boss. I would easily destroy this boss. I killed bosses. I killed the boss in the, the one that Octavian. Well, no, it was a different one. I killed the Huntress boss easily.
Good Sunder. Big chunk of life there gone.
I did. Fuck, you're pathetic. I mean, it took me 2 attempts, but whatever. The one with all the dogs.
Oh, it's way cooler watching it on the huge screen. Nice.
The tuning for these boss fights right now is fucking ridiculous. And it's weird that they're not saying, hey guys, the tuning is just for the meme.
Halfway.
For the convention. That's scary, right? Like, nobody wants to fight a boss for fucking 10 minutes. Unless it's like an ultra in-game boss.
I know it's going to be instinctive to portal here, but for the sake of others trying, I will implore you to try and not, but it's up to you. Don't want to give you any unfair disadvantage.
Give him merge, bro. Give him merge.
I reckon you've got this. Damageless.
He has learned the power of Sunder.
Pop off, King. Pop off. You can do it. Oh, he's saying shit. He's ramping. Yeah, but he's like, that's an ultra in-game boss. I just don't think they should take the campaign boss that should take this long. This is fucking ridiculous. This isn't even like end of act. It's just some mini guy. This is the equivalent of like Brutus. Move! JK. Go, King.
As far as I'm concerned, you've already won, which is awesome. It's a good attempt.
See, he's got this, bro. He's got this.
Still yet to be a success.
Oh. I believe her, I believe. She's really down to the checkpoint, right, where he gets his glasses back, right? Easy.
Very nice. Oi.
To be fair, his reading is pretty good.
Stretch.
This guy's better than Octavian, dude. Log in. Yeah. Pop up.
One thing I'm noticing a lot here is the instinct to use shift, attack in place all the time. It does result in misses. It is very hard to change the muscle memory there. I appreciate that. Perfect example.
You got this.
Oh, easy. Do it. Nice.
W, dude. Hey. 1 out of 1.
All right, thank you very much. We'll give one more person an attempt, and unfortunately, it's either that or we do a Q&A. We're going to go to a different boss that we haven't shown here. Well done. Come this way, I'll give you something. Or you can pick.
Got to use the quest reward.
There's a plushie, there's game pads if you want. Any of these. Just pick one item out of one bag. Feel free. Awesome, that's a legacy one as well. Well done, awesome. Nice. All right, we've got one more.
Loot, bro, you got real life loot.
Oh, you're right up the front here, let's go.
Where am I taking him?
Now, the good thing is if you dive very quickly, someone else gets shot.
Hey, Neil.
Nice to meet you. Octavian will get your situation there. This is the last one. Won't be a Q&A.
That's Katakara Usku, dude.
They're ready to do the questions.
Katakara Usku.
We'll just do this instead. I think it's more entertaining. Captain Heartland, please.
Heartland.
One we didn't show earlier, so you're going in blind a bit here unless you happen to get there during play demos out on the floor. Now, one interesting thing about this one is that this boss has a quest where you will find a person trapped in a... there's a little bit of spoiler here, I'm so sorry, but it is again on the play demo. You will find a Freya Heartland trapped in a Karui prison. And Freya Heartland is wanting you to rescue her, and she sends you off to kill her son, Captain Heartland. And
this is blind.
Corrupted.
He was just asking if we'd shown this one yet.
Is it live?
Blind. This is
blind? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
He's just off screen to the left there.
It's to your left, it's kind of top left corner of the screen to get to the boss. Go for it.
Oh shit, there we go.
This boss, once you do the quest, he actually drops a quest item. You take it back to town, you come back to the start of the area, and you talk to Freya Heartland, and you find that you will set free the Delirium NPC, is that the right one? The Strange Voice, and that actually unlocks Delirium League from doing that. So we have quests throughout the campaign that unlock the League mechanic from then spawning.
He's confident. He's confident. Look at the face.
The boss has an interesting mechanic where he kind of does a Wheel of Fortune kind of style. I don't know if that's the right thing, but anyway, spins the wheel and it lands on a specific mechanic. And then it flashes a particular color. So in this case, it was kind of teal, which means he will use that skill until he spins it again and changes the thing. So that one went to a different color, which I think is he will summon a giant anchor from the sky. I can't remember the color correlations. Oh, no, same color. I'm blind, apparently. And so we've got red here, which causes this giant cannon barrage to appear.
Pretty
and
cool.
then we have... Oh, that's back to the one from before. But he has a number of mechanics, and the fight changes based on which one of those it randomly yields. So we've got the purple one here, which I believe summons minions.
Yep.
Yeah, he didn't summon very many that time, but... And he's got 4, I believe, of these, but otherwise he's just got a bunch of pirate-themed skills. You've got
this
the
leg,
wave,
bro. Look at this leg go.
slows and degens you, pushes you. You've got a couple of slams. Ooh, yep. That is one of the 4 mechanics. He's got the cannon fire. Just let this play out. Doing pretty good.
All hands on deck is apparently 2 hands on deck. Oh, there we go. That's makes sense.
Just for the team back there, if I run over the time too much, because we've only got 38 seconds left, come and just tell me off.
Oh, he did.
We're
Yo,
good.
Marcy fucked Dev down, bro. Marcy fucked Dev down.
Alrighty, well, there's no time for Q&A, and we're perfectly hitting the end of the time. Anything else to talk about here? Any quickly, I didn't even get into any monsters, which is unfortunate, but that means there's more talks. Well done. Grab some merch. You don't have to succeed to do it, mate. The entertainment value gets you your prize. Anything. Feel free to look for more. Awesome. Thanks. Well done. Applause. Come on. Good effort. All right, that's about it, and hope you enjoyed it. It was very unscripted. I've got all kinds of notes here I never ended up reading, but it's fine. Go play the demos. Hope you have a good time. Thank you very much for attending. Have a great time in New Zealand. What else is there to say in these? That's probably about it. Thanks, Octavian, for playing and demonstrating them.
Yeah.
Thanks,
You're
everyone.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Could have died a little less. But...
Oh, is this it? Wait, which one is this one? Cock, I'm coming back on. Coming up next, art design. Wait, which is the one with currency? Which is the one with currency, boys? The one that I want to watch is the currency one, which is the big dick one. I'm here. Wait, can you see me? Can you see me? How many fingers am I holding up? Just so you know. How many am I holding up, dude? Oh yeah, get up. Oh yeah, oh definitely. And so those shorts are so nice, girls. So yeah, definitely. But Abby's over there. She's chilling a bit. She's very. Abby is gaming. She's meta gaming, like crazy, bro. She's meta gaming like she's majority of the way through the card game right now. So. It's not HotelCon. The convention isn't live right now. You dumb fucking retard cunts. You stupid ass motherfuckers. Right now, it's a fucking replay. Well, it's not a replay because you guys haven't seen this yet. I haven't seen this. I hadn't seen that monster thing. It's the stuff that wasn't on the stream that happened in the hole. So what I'm doing is I'm catching up on the things that I missed because I know the item one is mind-blowing, apparently. The item one is going to change everything, boys, so... Yeah. What do you mean separate bed? There's no separate bed, bro. There's one bed. What are you on about? There's one bed. That's a fucking... That's a couch, bro. That's my pillow. Abby brought my pillow, dude. It's kind of weird that it's like a yellow tinge.
Yeah, it's very weird.
It's an old pillow, boys. Yeah. It's an old pillow, what can I say? So, you know. Yeah. It's not that nasty, bro. What the fuck? I think that is maybe supposed to be yellow. I mean, it's... Oh, I fucking love the smell of my pillow.
Okay.
I fucking love the smell of my pillow. It's so good. Like legit, I could not sleep until I could not sleep properly till I brought that thing. I need to remember to bring that shit whenever I'm It's yellow, bro. That's how it is. It's not rappers. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, that boss fight shit, bro. I fought boss. I played the game for 40 minutes yesterday. Okay, PV2, 40 minutes. I couldn't stream it, obviously, otherwise I fucking would have. And, you know, watching that gameplay, it's pretty representative of my experience. Your characters, every single attack is just slow as fuck. And it does very little damage. It does very little damage. And then it kind of feels like you're just playing like a shitty character in PoE 1. Like a really you're playing like a two-handed Moriori build with no attack speed. It's like I'm talking. It's like Ruthless, except unironically you do more damage and have more. It's like Ruthless, but even slower and harder than Ruthless. Like I would say, Ruthless is like not even kidding. Ruthless is easier than whatever the fuck they're letting us play in PoE 2. Now, I was playing, okay, let's be clear here. I was playing the game on a fucking keyboard. I don't play the game on a keyboard. I play the game on my gamepad. Now, I was also playing the game on a computer setup that I'm not used to with weird mouse sensitivity, which I'm not used to. On top of that, it was keybinds that I'm not used to, that I have no idea what the fuck, you know, they're on these weird-ass fucking keybinds, bro. These fucking super weird keybinds. That didn't make no sense. Yeah, I'm a gamepad gamer. I play it, it's like a single-handed. And then, I was also playing on a fucking PC, and the game was going down to 40 FPS. And the computer specs were good, so... But the guy said apparently there's some performance... Basically, the guy there, because it was the guy who said... He said, yeah, they're working on improving the performance, because it's not supposed to go down that low. But the frame rate was low. Yeah. Now... If we just assume the controls are bad, because I'm not used to it, the computer's shit because it's not optimized, and then they deliberately tuned it hard, which they haven't said, because they haven't said, like, hey, we deliberately made this fucked up, guys. This is going to be different when the game actually releases. They haven't said that, right? Have you heard them say that once? Like, have you heard them say that once? What's this? You also had Mathel until the disc seeing you were getting, and you were skin alive. Okay, that's completely incorrect. I died a single time in the warrior, one time, and then I killed the boss of the huntress on the second attempt. You going to get him? Yeah.
I'm just gonna meet Zizzle and the breakfast again. I'm gonna grab some fruit.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna go station him.
Okay, give me some pants. Yeah,
Still in your card.
You get some. Wait, you stole my card? What the fuck?
Stole your card for your pants.
Jeez, this you bring that shit back, get him.
No, I just don't know how many do you want?
I mean, this one's there. I don't know, like 4. I think.
They're just different colours.
Different colours, get some cool colours. And there's the same exact thing, except just pants as well. Maybe just one of those as well.
They're just like joggers. I mean, they're just sweatpants.
Yeah.
Shorts.
I mean, yeah, I believe in you, Giddle. You can just, yeah. If they're the correct size and everything.
You just get the medium ones, don't you?
Yeah, medium, but I don't like to be too tight. I don't like to be too loose. It's gotta be a certain type of. You can try.
There's Hallensteins as well, so I can see if I can get you those ones.
Okay, all right. Let me see it. Okay, I Giddle. I'll have fun, Giddle. Have fun.
I was gonna say, did you show them that one?
Oh, you want to see the new shirt? You guys want to see the new shirt?
It's quite cool.
You see that this is like one of the new merches. This is one of the merches right here, boys. It's like I don't know if the lighting's good, but it is very shiny.
Shiny.
The fuck even is it? It's like I think it's like cast inoculation or something.
I don't know. And Stability wanted the red one, which is a different thing inside. I don't know if it was.
There we go, boys. There we go.
I'll meet you at the place.
What meet where? If you come back with clothing, just bring it back here. But no, I don't. I'll be speaking out. I'll be running around the convention. Don't rely. You just go. You pop off this and pop off the leader, and then go play your card game. Go get that mirror. Go get that mirror thing. You gotta do that fast as well because they'll run out if they haven't already ran out. So I mean, there's a good chance they could because there was a finite amount. I got it. Love you. Wait, what's chat doing? Wait, what's chat doing? Ziz got one. Yeah, okay, Ziz, bro. Got some handouts. All right. He's trying to say he's fully ethical. Okay, he's trying to say he's fully ethical. All right, don't even get me started on this. Abby told me how it happened. Abby told me what happened with this. All right. Okay, so yeah. All right. Don't even get me started here. All right, buddy. I'm not ditched. No, I'm gonna watch the fucking currency thing, dude. Showcase, part of Exile showcase. What's this? Are you leaking right now? Basic, part of Exile.
D4 bad. D4 bad.
Really, dude? He D4, dude. He's cancelled, bro. He's cancelled. Prove it could be incorrect. What the fuck is this? He's generally yelling crap at the showcase team as being slain on purpose because I'm not incorrect, you dumb fucking bitch.
But then we also
what do you fucking ban this guy? I'm gonna ban this guy. You fucking ban you dumb fucking retard, stupid ass cunt bitch. Fuck you. I literally asked chat. You dumb. Oh shit. Fuck's happening with audio. Fuck's up with audio. I mean, if
person at Grinding Gear Games. I do a little bit more than that. I got my fingers in a few different pies. I kind of know a bit about rigging and animation, and come from a graphic design background, so I'm a bit particular about the 2D part of the item art, despite being a 3D guy. So I'm going to get into the art aspect of PoE 2's items, and I'm going to pass it over to Hirishi afterwards to talk about the wonderful numbers stuff you guys love so much. Alright, so art in our game is, for items, is in two different sort of fields of what we refer to as the 3D art, which is what you see on your character, obviously, and the 2D art, which is, I think, is actually the most important part, and I say this as a guy that spends a lot of time modeling this stuff. The 2D art is the part that you're picturing in your head. It's the part that is just, it's the icon. It's iconic, all the way back to the 90s, like when I was a kid playing Diablo 1. You didn't see it on your character. The inventory was where you saw it, so it was the most important thing. So you'd look at this little icon of like Griswold's Edge or the Butcher's Cleaver, and you'd be like, "Oh, that's so cool! Oh, does fire damage! Wow!" But for PoE 1, obviously you see your 2D art on your 3D model, but even to this day, there's still some uniques that don't have any 3D art, which is a bit of a fail. That's not going to happen anymore. PoE 2, the 2D art always comes from the 3D art because we render it out at high quality. In the past, the 2D art was a bit of a mishmash of all sorts of stuff. This is random stuff that I've grabbed from the icons folder. Some of it looks like a 3D model, it's like A-posed. Some of it's like a photo, just a straight up photo. Some of it's like super cartoony, like this guy down here. It ends up with a very inconsistent kind of front end to the game. Like, you guys are used to it. You play the game so many years and items get added over time that it doesn't really matter. But it was always a bit of a problem to me that things look inconsistent. It's because different artists have different approaches to how they just paint and render and do things, and sometimes they'll be like, we need a unique yesterday. So someone will just get a photo of a shield, I guess. And so PoE 2, these aren't the same items as the previous screen, so don't freak out that Calm's heart now looks like that, because that's not it. This is just an example of similar size stuff. Basically, every single item, even if it's a small thing, gets through the full treatment. I was modeling little gum nuts for that little potion bottle right there just to render it. The flasks are all redone in 3D. Everything's redone in 3D. And the goal is that you get a consistent image on all the items. So everything in your inventory, everything in your stash, it's going to look clean and like it came from the same place, because the rendering is like the great equalizer. It doesn't paint a certain way on this side or whatever. So everything's going to be clean. So this is an example of some shields. Top is dex, bottom is strength dex, and we're calling those obviously bucklers. And these ones we're calling a Taj, or I just call them a shield because they're kind of like the standard, just a shield. These things always highlighted a problem with me in the game because I'm a visual person, and I'd glance at stuff and I'd go, what is that? It's round and it's a shield, and I'd be like, I'd have to like think a bit. For people that play the game all the time, you get that vocabulary, you know what it is, you've played it a million times, you've seen all these items. But I think for a brand new game, it's even more important to really get things nice and clear. So what I'm doing with all the main primary stat shields is they all point that way, and the split ones go that way. For stuff like this where they're all round, I think it's really important because, again, as soon as it drops the name, it's always going to be something buckler or a Taj, and you'll just know, okay, that's a thing. That's dex. And it's sitting in your inventory. You don't even have to like, you just glance at it and you'll just know. Same thing with like axes is a good example, because axes to me always look like they can be two-handed or one-handed, and they're kind of frustrating to look at. Again, I've chosen to make the one-handed go this way, two-handed that way. It's like a small thing. Trying it out, it might get rolled back later. They might all end up facing the same way. I personally like it. Just a few base types from the axe. This isn't by means all of them. This is just some of them. Like I said, even the small stuff gets the same treatment. So we've got some amulets, and these three, I'll let you figure out what they might do. But yeah, they go through the same treatment. We have a lot of control because they're 3D rendered. We can try just play around with what they are, and it's very hard to get an artist to say, I think I want the sword this way and painted like that. And they go, well, I just have to repaint the whole thing then, I guess, which they don't. Currency orbs, same thing. And these were a fun one because we got to redesign what we thought of them as. Previous head honcho Eric, who's now retired, this was his little baby. Again, he's actually printed massive scale cast bronze of these things. He's got a huge exalted orb that's like this big. But yeah, it was mostly just to get them to be more cohesive, so they've got that same kind of that Roman kind of bust head thing going on with a lot of them. Yeah, and so they all get the same treatment, even if they're a little guy. Some armors. So these are the base types. First 6 for the different character branches. So I don't know if you're able to tell, but there is a gradient that occurs here. So it goes from dex, dex int, strength, strength dex. Strength, and then strength dex. And it kind of loops around where the strength dex looks a little lighter, and it kind of, that's a personal thing as well, just trying to get things to be very clearly gradiented across the items so that it feels like you can just glance at stuff and just know what it is. And this comes into the naming of things, which is also, as a visual person, it's another thing. It actually had an impact on the art in a cool way as well. So every single dex base type armor will be something vest or something coat. Same with all these. They're all going to be called that. And you might go, that's kind of limiting. But that limitation actually kind of breeds really interesting creativity to actually accentuate them more. And like I said, you get a cool gradient that happens as you go through the stats, and it loops back around. So everything's strength will just look massive. What's the unique, the bronze one with the massive...
Brass dome?
Brass dome. There's a base type that just is that big, you know what I mean? Like, Same thing with all the items. A pet peeve is when you're working on all these things, so many things get called boots, helmet, gauntlets, and after a while, from the art managing side, I got really annoyed. I was just like, what is this again? And so it was like affecting the management part as well as me just reading stuff in the game as well. So they're all going to be basically partitioned in a way, naming-wise, that affects the art a little bit. It's not as strict as you would think. Like, say, if I go, I'll let you look at that for a little bit. Like, say, the gauntlets, right? They've got, like, these ones here have got a bit of a leather bracer aspect that kind of starts transitioning over to what the Dex ones do, which will be only focused more on this area. And they kind of spread out, and so there's just more identity between them. Here's a good example actually versus PoE 1, because I think the Dex Int gloves are called the mittens, right?
Yep.
And that always bothered me because a mitten style gauntlet is actually a thing, and it's a very strong, strengthy, bulky looking thing. So all the strength gauntlets are now called mitts. All the strength ones are the ones that are called gauntlets. So every strength gauntlet will have this real chunky vibe that just separates itself. You're not going to feel like it looks like it could blend across 3 different classes. So I think we just get more variety of just gear this way. I think helmets is the best example of the gradient I keep talking about, where Dex is where I've got hoods, but you'll notice that Dex Int, there's a hood, Strength Dex, there's a hood, but the defining feature of that is that it's a helmet. The defining feature of that one is that there's a little COVID mask in there. Yeah. So I've talked about base types for a bit. So now I'm going to go over the difference between base types and uniques in PoE 2 from an art perspective. It's something most people, I guess, don't think about. But we're trying to treat the base type items with very clear, distinct lighting, but it still is stylistic. It's not just this flat, I just threw it in the renderer and hit render type thing. We have place lights, and we've tried to make it look as cool as it can. It's very clear and subtle. There's a bit of warm lighting, a little bit of cool. That's about it. And the uniques don't really have any rules. We just sort of make them look as bold and colorful and interesting as possible. And the other thing is, every base type in PoE 2 will have a unique associated with it at launch. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them. And every single base type has unique art in and of itself. There's no base type that repeats. You will not get a shield later that has the same name, has a different name and the same art. Every single act has entirely unique art all the way through the game. So, to me, the unique, having a bit of a bond with the base type that it comes from is kind of important, because otherwise it kind of ruins the item identity of both. If you had a unique sword that was a scimitar looking curvy thing, but the base type was just a straight blade, it's kind of shouldn't that be with the base type that has a curvy blade? It's kind of common sense to me. So the shield in the middle is a pretty good example. They're very similar structurally, but very different in terms of what actually happens. This one being super Celtic and really ancient bronze looking, and we'll do something very cool with the numbers, I imagine. This little shield I like a lot. This little buckler with a spooky man trapped in there. This is an example of the lighting of these things. So this is actually unique armor that they don't know about. Doesn't do anything yet. That's lit how we would do a base type. And then here I remove it all and I try to give it some more character, make it look a little bit more moody and a little bit more special. And we do this for all the items. We hand place and we pose the meshes and we try and get a really iconic little look to it. So that's the difference between those two things. And here I might get Trishi to sort of pitch me back in, because this is going over the act-specific rundown of gear. So in each act, you will find a gear specifically for that act. So all the base types will look like they're very Maraketh in Act 2. And as soon as you get to Act 3, they're going to look very vile. And you purchase them
Yep.
Just from the vendors?
Yeah, so the vendors of each act only sell gear that comes from that particular act.
Mm-hmm.
They don't sell, like, you don't go to Act 2 and you can't buy Act 1 gear.
And you just get more distinct looks. I personally really wanted that gigantic stone Aztec shield, and people were worried it was too big, and I said it might not be big enough for me. I wanted it this thick. Anyway, so this sort of getting into the art focus of items in terms of some tropes that happen with fantasy art in games quite a lot that kind of bug me. All that stuff is obviously AI crap. But, I mean, you know, it looks cool. When I was 13, I would be like, hell yeah, it's got spikes all over it. But after a while, you've seen these. They're in everything. There's so many games that have that, and just loads of it. And you can infinitely produce. I mean, AI just did 4 of them like in half a second. Whereas this stuff is from our world, and it goes back centuries, and there's just a rich history and culture behind all this art making and weaponsmithing from like just different metal making practices in all these different countries, India and like old cultures like the Scythians and the Mongols, and how it all blends in. And I think artists need to do more to really learn from the past to make more interesting looking stuff. This is what I want PoE2's items to feel more like these really rich, dense things that have all this history behind them. We do a lot of investigation on the environment side with stuff. Like early on, there was talks of like how the Maraketh would write musical notation and how that would affect sculptures on the walls and like the environment art, and then trying to get that into like the item designs and stuff as well. So a lot of thought goes on there to like get things to have a real rich sense of culture, because for a game that's all about items, you don't want everything to just look like a jagged spiky sword every single time, or like just cool flaming blade of blah. You just want, like, there's a place for them, but having just like a spoon, it's just a weird spoon, and that's the unique, is kind of cool to me. There will be a spoon.
What is it going to do?
You figure that out. So this is the part I really like, is that I personally make a lot of weapons and items and stuff. But the cool thing is I make all these unique items. Oh, this is a drop, by the way. This is nothing. If I could have a screen that went all around the whole building, it still wouldn't get them all. They'd keep going. There's many. Anyway, they don't know about them most of the time. I'm just making them. And then I sort of give it to them. And to me, it's kind of like they've actually found a unique, and they don't know what it does. Like, it's actually unidentified. And they have to be their own little Deckard Cain and be like, what the hell does this do? Which is really exciting to me. Like I don't know, this little weird wand up the top that is basically a hand holding a bell. I don't know, I just wanted a hand. You hold a hand that holds bell. And so I just think, well, there's cool stuff there. Does it like
pretty cool.
reverberate your spells? Cool. Does it bounce things back? I don't know. It does stuff. It'll be cool, I promise. But I have bad hearing, I didn't hear that. Anyway, that was just a little tease of stuff. I just wanted to just show you that the items in PoE2 are going to be very rich, and every unique is going to have a lot of interest and just flair and just feel like it came from somewhere. It wasn't just like always just it looks cool. Like some of them are just they look cool, but a lot of them are going to be really well thought out. From the art side, I don't know about the numbers. So this is where I pass over to
As a guy who made Ruthless, by the way. This guy's like made every unique ever.
And thank you.
And the last. He's like, he makes items.
Hey, so let's talk about item mechanics then. So my name is Rishi. I'm a game designer at Grinding Gear Games. I mostly work on item stuff. I've been working on them for a really long time, although, of course, I do other stuff as well.
You make Cloak of Defiance, for example.
So, It is no secret that we think items are very important to this game. Like, we just spent, all this time talking about just what they look like. And there's so much more to them, right? Like, we want items to feel real. They're more than just a collection of stats. And now that PoE 2 is a game in itself, we have a chance to look at items all the way at its very fundamentals and try to make some changes that we couldn't make in an existing game because of the worry of how you would port existing items over to a new system. So I'd like to go over some of these fundamental changes with you. So this is the first problem that we really wanted to tackle. In Path of Exile 1, different weapon classes don't necessarily feel that different from each other. Like just take an axe and take a sword. There are some light stat differences. Some of them have, faster swing speeds or faster damage per hit. But how much does that difference actually matter? So for this reason, we added implicits to all the weapons. So, every sword has an accuracy-related implicit in most cases. Axes don't have implicits. Maces have stun-related implicits, and so on. And it helps. It gives them a bit of identity. But it doesn't really make them feel that different, right? Like, you're still just swinging a bunch of stats. The other problem, too, is that most skills you can use with kind of any weapon. So what you really care about is, at the end of the day, which is the weapon that's going to do the most damage, and I'm going to use that weapon. So I want to talk about the attribute, like attribute alignments in this game. And we consider this very important as a way of aligning certain attributes with different mechanics in the game. There are some new weapons in there. I'll let you look to see what they are. But effectively what we do is we associate different weapons with different attributes, and that sort of gives us a some guidance on what their stats will be. For example, armor-related stats are usually aligned to strength in our game. Evasion is aligned to dexterity. Energy shield is aligned to intelligence. And damage is no different, right? Strength-aligned weapons generally have higher damage per individual hit. Dex-aligned weapons are usually faster when it comes to their swing speeds. And int-aligned weapons are usually really good at dealing critical strikes. So, using this as a baseline, it's kind of clear that, a mace is going to have higher damage per individual hit, whereas a claw is going to be faster, and, a dagger is going to have more crit, and so on. So, we have tried to emphasize these differences really heavily in Path of Exile 2. So, I just have, a random dagger from the dagger base types picked up and a random axe. And you can see the difference in critical strike chances is much higher than what you might be used to.
What?
So a dagger is going to start with 15%, and then you have mods that improve it over and above that. So when you're using a dagger, you're really going to feel like you're critting a lot. Whereas an axe, you can see the base damage of the weapon is going to be, like per hit is going to be quite a bit higher. But all this too, this is going to change like how you view weapons, but it's still not entirely enough as well, because ultimately the difference between a mace and an axe, for example, is the sort of attacks you can do with it. So we have, so in Path of Exile 2, most attacks are going to be usable with a single weapon. So this immediately makes designing new attacks a lot more interesting, because you're not thinking, what's a cool attack? You're thinking, what is a cool thing that an axe in particular can do? So let's talk about axes. So, axes, as you can see from the chart, they will be slightly faster than maces. They do slightly less damage per individual hit than a mace, but they're still primarily strength aligned, so they're going to do a lot of damage per hit. But on top of this, what defines an axe thematically are themes such as culling and executes. And in Path of Exile 2, you can throw them. So that leads to really interesting skill design, because you can throw them, wait for them to return. It's almost like a boomerang.
Oh shit!
Daggers. So daggers are sort of 50% in the int section, 50% in the dex section. So they're both high crit and high and have decent swing speed, but obviously per hit their damage will be lower. Thematically, what do you think of when you think of a dagger? They're mostly all about fast attacks trying to find the weak spot of enemies, which sort of perfectly matches what they are in this chart. And they're also thematically linked to poison, which will really come out in the skill design for daggers. So when you have this identity of item class sorted in this way, you don't need to have an implicit that is on every single weapon of that type. So we've removed them. All swords do not have, an accuracy implicit. All daggers don't have, a crit implicit and whatever.
Okay.
So now that the implicit slot is empty, we can make interesting implicits that sort of make certain bases throughout the game feel very different to each other. Because it's not super interesting if you're just going up a ladder of slightly stronger and stronger bases. We want to throw something in there to make the upgrades not feel too monotonous. So we've added some wacky implicits, and I'd like to show you some of them. So this is an axe. You'll find it at a certain level. And you might notice that this deals no physical damage whatsoever. Its base damage is just pure fire. So this is going to give you some interesting considerations when you find it. Like, how are you going to build for it, especially if the axe before and the axe after is mostly physical? So it's not just that it's a damage upgrade from the previous axe. There are these other interesting considerations to think about as you go through. Here's another one. Yeah, so this is a mace that destroys enemies that you kill with critical strikes. Now it sounds pretty useful, right? That, because who doesn't want corpse removal on their weapon? Yeah. But note that this is a mace. Maces are not necessarily that good at dealing critical strikes. It could be useful, but how do you make it useful? It's not interlined, so it's going to have low crit. There will be mods that can increase its crit, but still, the way you built for it is supposed to really make you think. It's not that it's necessarily immediately useful. It's cool to have these sort of thematic things throughout the game, and it's just a puzzle piece that is there, so that sometime in the future, someone might find something that they can do with this, that only this would allow you to do. If some of you have played the demo and have played the warrior class, you might have noticed that they have a mechanic that breaks enemy armor. It's primarily a mace mechanic, but there is a dagger that does it here. The mace skills are normally the ones that interact with this in a number of ways, but a dagger does it. Breaking armor is obviously useful, and that makes this very special and build defining. But how are you going to best make use of something like this? Oh, that's an exercise left to the user. I'm sure there'll be a million different broken things that'll come out of all of this. So, I've spent a bunch of time talking about attack weapons, so let me briefly touch on caster weapons. So, in PoE 1, they were quite strange, right? Like you had a staff, and they had attack mod, and they had attack attributes, and they could roll attack mods, but you're a mage, you don't want to hit people with the staff, you want to cast your spells. And as a result, their mod pools are a lot worse because you have both attack mods and spellcaster mods rolling. Like, of course, they did improve your spellcaster mods, but because there were all these mods rolling on the same item, it was really hard to get a good one. We tried a bunch of band-aid fixes over the years, like I'm sure you're well aware of us introducing rune daggers and splitting staves into regular staves and war staves, but they didn't really fix the underlying issue. So we feel it's better to break out these concepts entirely. So, in PoE 2, wands and staves will have no attack stats whatsoever. They just come with a skill that costs no mana. These spells can be a number of things, from just a straight up damage spell like this one, which is the first staff you get as you wash up on the beach, or a number of other things that can be used alongside your other skills. The later ones obviously tend to have a few more interesting considerations. Like this one obviously will be very familiar with anyone who's played PoE, where this lets you triple cast your next skill, which is obviously really good for skills with really long cast times. Here's an example of
Comet. Hog champion.
Pretty fun, right? So you might be wondering, what about people that want to hit people with staves? So we have split out the melee portion of staves into its own weapon class called a quarterstaff, and it's sort of thematically linked to the monk. But again, this is part of Exile. Anyone can use any weapon and do anything. All the mods here are obviously attack-related mods, and here is a particularly interesting one, which has a longer range than every other quarterstaff, and you can actually see its art looking longer than the others in-game if you compare two quarterstaffs together. So, we've talked about the two, I would say, core archetypes that we sort of support in Path of Exile 1 with attackers and spellcasters. But trappers and miners, of course, are another archetype that sort of got left in the dust a little bit in Path of Exile 1. Like, they were fully supported with a bunch of skills and everything, but they didn't really have gear that was specifically designed for them. They just sort of used, caster weapons because, it increased the damage of their skills. But it's really thematically weird because they're not a mage. They're supposed to be mechanically aligned and that sort of thing. So we wanted to add an item type that can be used specifically with trappers. So the first major change is traps are no longer spells. Traps are just trap damage, and there will be ways to improve specifically trap damage that are not related to spells. So this is an example of the new base type that you can use in your main hand. It takes both your hands, and you can see that the throw time of the trap is listed on the item itself. And yes, that means you can modify it further with mods on the item.
What the fuck?
The other thing you might notice is that it has a detonation type. That is because we have sort of combined the concept of trappers and miners into one thing. Mines are also trap skills, but with a different detonation type. So you can take any trap skill, swap your weapon that you're using, and it's now a mine. It's not that you have to specifically find a mine skill to use, to actually have that playstyle. And the other interesting thing is, with the new weapon swapping system, you can have a trap in your alternate weapon set, so you can still use other skills, but still trap occasionally if you really want to as well. I do have an example of a mine as well. So this one, as you can see, will have the detonation type, which is manual, which requires you to detonate them afterwards. And yes, just like other weapons, there will be implicits on some of these throughout the progression. So you'll have these interesting considerations on trappers as well. So the other archetype that never had a specific item class dedicated to it was minion builds and general support type characters. Like, we've tried a bunch of band-aid fixes over the years, like about the Convoking Wand, and we've added bone rings, and we've done a few of those things, but they don't really fix the root of the problem. They do help, but what you really want is a set of items that you can find throughout the game that is specifically for this particular class. And as you know, we've added Spirit as a concept, which is for our skills that were previously reserving your mana, but it also is about permanent minions also use your Spirit. So if you want more zombies, there's no such thing as just getting plus zombies. It's just increasing your Spirit gives you more zombies. You can use as much of your Spirit as you like to get as many zombies as you like.
What the
It is completely dependent on how much Spirit you have. So we obviously wanted a base type to support this, and scepters are thematically perfect for this kind of thing because they were also kind of weird with the whole half attack, half spellcaster type of thing. So I have some examples of scepters here. As you can see, the mods almost always grant aura-like effects, or they improve the spirit on the item itself. So it's almost like you get to build your own aura and hold it in either your main hand or your offhand. You get to have that flexibility where, if you're not planning on doing much attacking or spellcasting yourself, then hold it in your main hand, have a shield, and you're pretty defensive, and you get to buff your allies or your minions, or your allies and your minions, I should say. But if you want to, let's say, do some attacking as well, then you can just hold it in your offhand if you like. And then you can still have a weapon in your main hand. You can do some damage, for something like, a build that would be similar to Dominating Blow. You can still have a weapon, and you can still buff your minions in your offhand. You can also put it in your alternate weapon set if you want to just buff your allies once in a while and not all the time. But just be careful not to use the extra spirit that you gain to use your minions, because when you swap out, your minions will go away. So we've talked a bit about skills before.
That sounds jank.
So as you might have seen in the keynote, we had a big problem with how skill gems dropped in Path of Exile 1. Because the more skill gems we add, the less chance you have of finding the one that you particularly want. And because to solve this problem, we added gem vendors in Path of Exile 1 so you could get one anytime that you like. solution, because what's trivial to get any gem at any time? And at that point, why are they even itemized? Like, you should just have access to your skills, right? So in Path of Exile 2, we wanted to both have the fun moment where you find a gem of like a higher tier, but also we wanted to not prevent you from just using a skill that you want to use at that particular time. So we've added uncut gems. So regular skill gems no longer drop, and you just find uncut gems of a certain tier. And you can use them to turn them into any skill of that particular tier. And they come pre-leveled. So what that means is it's a lot easier to switch into a new skill, because you don't have to then re-level that skill from level 1 and wait for the damage to come back to what the current skill it was that you were using. Like, you can just seamlessly swap from one to the other. What this means is certain gems just don't exist at lower levels. For example, I think Firestorm is a 28th skill in Path of Exile 1. So in this, so here you might get Firestorm at level 5, and levels below level 5 just don't exist. So so let's get into the meat of the matter, which is item drops. As you all know, we want item drops on the ground to matter more. You generally don't pick up rares on the ground, because you know if you're going to pick them up, 9 times out of 10 they're probably going to suck, right? Like you're not going to use them. There are a number of reasons for this, and we are trying to address a lot of these reasons when we're redoing item drops from the ground up in PoE 2. But there is one particular reason that I wanted to talk about, and that is actually because of how the Chaos Orb functions. So if I pick up, let's say, a helmet of item level 70 and another helmet of item level 70, and I use a Chaos Orb on both of them, it doesn't matter what you picked them up. It doesn't matter what item it was that you picked up originally, because they're now completely new items. The only thing that mattered is the item level of the item that it started with, in both cases. The mods that they came with just no longer matter anymore. So every base type is effectively the same, just as good as every other base type for the purposes of, for the purposes of a Chaos Orb anyway. So picking up a rare at that point is identical to using a single Chaos Orb on that same base type. So we're making a change to how Chaos Orb works in Path of Exile 2. So rather than re-rolling the item entirely, it replaces one mod on the item.
What the fuck?
Just one. So this means the item that you start with matters a whole lot more when it comes to this. Because you pick up a rare, it has, 2 to 3 great mods, maybe 1 or 2 really bad mods. Those rares previously were not going to be useful, because it didn't matter that it had a few good mods, because it also had those bad mods that sort of made the item not worth using. But now what you can do is you can just, like every item could be 1 or 2 Chaos Orbs away from becoming a really great item. Whereas previously those rares were still not good because they didn't have those good mods. And now you will hopefully use your Chaos Orbs for a lot of these sort of near-miss rares. Just use one, and if it doesn't work out, well, the item wasn't that fantastic to begin with anyway, because it still had those bad mods. But if one of those bad mods turns into a good one, then that would be fantastic, and that would really improve this feeling of the items in the ground mattering more, because what you started with now is of paramount importance. But if this was the only change, then the best way to make items would be to, start from a magic item, spam your alterations, how many ever thousands it would take, and then regal, and then do that. So for that reason, we're making a few changes, but the first one is that alteration orbs will no longer exist in Path of Exile 2.
What the fuck?
The way to do this is you must start with a good magic item or a good rare item, or you can create one with a transmute or a Chaos Orb. Now, to help all these changes, we have gone through every single item and looked at their mod pool and made changes to every single item's mod pool. So almost everything will be different to help you with this process of making item drops matter more. So to quickly wind up, I want to touch on unique items. Oh, there we go. Our philosophy on unique items is that they must be the best item for somebody. But most unique should not be the best item for everybody. Now, we obviously feel like unique items are very important to us. And as Dane mentioned, we want to have a unique item on every single base type. Some of you may not know this, but before I started working at GGG, I designed one of the supporter uniques way back in the day. So I have had massive love for the unique items of this game. The support unique that I made back in 2013 was Cloak of Defiance, which resulted in the Mind of a Matter keystone. And I've been involved in making unique items ever since Breach, which is 2016. So it's been quite a while. So we want to make many unique items for everybody. They are meant to enable wacky things. They're meant to let you do things that you thought would never be possible and possibly be build-defining. So I have an example of a low-level unique that we made. I wish we had more to show you, but this one here is pretty interesting in that it always freezes enemies for its full duration when you hit them the first time. So you always have a really strong initiation as soon as you walk up to an enemy. So, like Dane mentioned, every base type will have a unique, and that includes a lot of new uniques. But don't worry. What this also means is we are going to be bringing a lot of your favorites from Path of Exile 1 into Path of Exile 2. Because is it really a Path of Exile game if you don't have a Headhunter or a Shavs in it? Yeah, exactly. So they might be slightly different to what you might be used to. You know, a few stats might be different here and there as a result of the mechanics changing, but they will be instantly recognizable as a result. And you'll have a lot of your favorites that you used to that you used to like playing with in Path of Exile 1, and you will have a lot of new ones as well to find as you go through. So I think that's everything from my end. I guess we have some time for questions.
Yo, ask about currency.
Come on, Zachy.
Ask about currency. Bro, what the fuck?
Hello, my name's Zach, and I'm a game designer for GGG, and I will be doing the questions here.
I talked to that guy.
While I wait for people to submit some questions, I will ask one I prepared earlier, and that is, does the art of the item dictate the design, or do you design first and then get the art for the item?
It can be very different depending on what is necessary at the time. Like sometimes we just have to make a lot of uniques in a really short amount of time. And if we have art available, then we try to fit the stat to what the unique art is already there. But generally sometimes it's, you know, we have this crazy idea that we're like, can we do this? And it's like, well, it sounds cool, let's do it. And then we make an item and it's just a blank item without a name, without any art, and then we try it in game, it's like, this unique is awesome, and then we make the art for it. So it can go both ways. I would say more often than not, at least in Path of Exile 1, it's been mechanics first into art, but, you know, that may not be...
Yeah, and for PoE2 it's more the opposite for now, because for a long time they didn't really know what they were doing with items, and as basically a blacksmith that just smashes things out really quickly, I was just like, that's a cool sword, that's a cool sword, that's a cool sword. I just make all this stuff, and yeah, they're going to find that treasure trove of stuff and turn it into stuff. But I think it's really valuable to have art that can inspire gameplay stuff that they weren't even thinking of. They might not even have, it never entered their mental space.
Oh yeah, that happens a lot, I would say.
They'll just see it and go, oh, this thing's like split in two, and it could be like, you know, hits the guy here, I don't know.
Okay. That'd be fun.
So let's see what else we've got here. Do you have any memorable uniques from PoE 1 that you have designed?
Oh, that is a tough question because I've made so many. I think one of my favorites, or at least I would say very memorable, was Indigon. Because Indigon was probably the start of that entire set of mana-related spells that followed later. But Indigon was really the first. It was the first item that weaponized mana into a form of damage.
Yep.
I have a thing for that as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask for the outside if you have any like of your favorite art pieces.
I've been doing pretty much most of the unique item art since, I guess, whenever Betrayal happened. I came on board a little after
2017?
that.
Maybe?
Oh wait.
Maybe?
Last 5 years. Something like that. And so I've done a lot of the art for them, and the art has a very different name to the final game. It's not even close. It gets changed. An interesting one to me is the shield everyone knows as the Squire. think it's the thing with 3 white sockets.
Shit.
Yeah, I made them have 3 white sockets from an art perspective.
I remember.
Because I modeled 3 white sockets, eyeball things on it, and I was like, it's going to have 3 white sockets.
Yeah, I actually remember this.
And they were like, okay.
Well, it was busted anyway, so adding the 3 white sockets, I don't know if it really changed too much.
Yeah, so I just made more OP. But on that same day, I just made it, and they were like, oh, we need another shield. And I was like, okay, I'll make a cooler one. So I made a cooler shield visually, and that ended up being the oppressor.
Jesus Christ.
And I was very bummed about
Trash
that.
to trash.
Definitely wasn't the cooler shield.
If I knew, I would have not made it that cool looking. I'd have dug some trash out of the unused folder.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we've got here. In terms of making art and I guess items for an act, how are you like getting inspired or taking inspiration from?
We have really strong art direction people. Some come and gone. Shout out Chanda. And they really just put a really dense fabric of thinking over all of the acts, like really going into Marrakech and Val and Karui and others I'm not going to talk about. And just basically we would work with them and establish like common shape language and like themes and stuff and just to make things feel cohesive and part of that world. Same kind of patterns and shapes and stuff like that. And it's the most interesting part, I think, because it sort of, you create stuff no one's ever seen before, kind of, because it's like, it just doesn't, there's like weapons made of like cactus wood. Like, no one makes weapons of cactus wood. But they were like, oh, these people, they only have access to cactus wood. So the handle has to be cactus. I'm like, all right. I can't have just wood, otherwise it breaks the theme. It's like, well, where'd they get that wood from? It's like small stuff like that.
Another question we have here, are there versions of the early game bases that have stats appropriate for, I guess, towards endgame?
Oh, yes. So those implicits that you will see throughout the campaign will be repeated in endgame, in sort of endgame bases. So if you happen to like, something that an implicit enabled earlier on, you will be able to use it later on as well. Probably should have mentioned that earlier.
I guess this is in reference to the Chaos Orbs. Will Alk Scouring still work?
No, it won't, because there will not be any Scouring Orbs.
Jesus Christ, bro.
If you want another item, you're going to have to Alk a white one.
Holy shit.
Why is there no 75% int, 25% strength or dex weapons? So, why aren't you fitting more of the pie into the ratio?
Yeah.
You haven't seen all the weapons yet.
Well, maybe.
There actually is a few, but it wouldn't have really, looked really nice in that graphic because some of the staves will have skills that are more, strength interline spell, and then that would actually take up the 75% strength, int 25% strength section of the tree. That is slightly more, nebulous, like in a little way, because the caster weapons don't actually have those base stats to, change as a result of their attributes, but it's more just, I suppose, where, what attribute requirements the skills that are aligned to that particular class requires. But again, this is part of Exile. You're going to use an int weapon, a strength skill, and everything,
There's just a lot of questions. It's really hard to filter through all of them.
Pick one, pussy. Pick one.
There's way more than I expected. This is good. Does the art for items come from the story or the lore, or does the art sometimes influence the lore?
Bro, what is that question you chose, man?
Sometimes it kind of makes itself up as it goes, but there are times where there's obviously characters and they have stuff. Like there will be bosses and things that a unique weapon is just straight up like you'll get it off them kind of thing.
There have definitely been times where we've made a unique with some story behind it, and then we've expanded on it at a much later date.
Yeah.
So it's always nice to have these sort of story threads that we can then follow up on later on.
This could be interesting. Was there a memorable unique you tried to design that couldn't be implemented for a technical reason?
Oh, yes, actually.
Oh, shit.
There are so many of these, but I think my favorite example is, so there's that helmet that drops from Kurgal, the boss in Delve, the Lich from Delve, called Hail Negator, I think. So originally, the effect of what that helmet was supposed to do was it was supposed to do what the Agnostic Keystone does, where it was supposed to drain your mana and heal your health. But for technical reasons that I don't actually remember now, it could not exist on an item that also had Energy Shield on it. And it couldn't exist unless it turned off your Energy Shield. So when we were doing the Legion Keystones, we had to come up with something completely different in the last week before the release of Delve. But I always really loved that idea because it was just a really cool thing that, and then when we were designing those millions of keystones when we were doing the Legion, like the Timeless Jewels, this idea just came back and I just kept pushing. I was like, we got to find a way to do this because it'll be really awesome. And eventually, the way we were able to do it was, well, if you turn off ES entirely, then we can do it. So it sort of works as a downside, which, it probably did need one at least at the time, but it also was a technical reason why it needed to exist.
And I guess as the last question before we run out of time here,
And that other
are
guy.
there item types with all three attribute split?
Not currently, no.
I want them.
Yeah?
For now.
For now.
And with that, we have run out of time for this panel. So,
all right, thank you very much. And hope you enjoy the rest of ExileCon.
Anyone from
Guys.
Australia? Anyone from Australia?
What the fuck? Look at anyone from Australia. I met that art guy, but I thought he was just a random stoner. I didn't know he was one of the main dudes. I don't know it's one of the main dudes. I've just covered my feet up. I'm comfy, and then the fucking got the really loud music on. Oh shit, wait, is ExileCon about to start? Wait, is ExileCon about to start? What the fuck? Are they about to do a Gazzy TV roundtable? Oh no. How's a total event? Okay, bitch. You understand? Okay, so a lot of people are retarded. So a lot of you guys are idiots, right? And what you don't realize is that the fucking event isn't actually going yet, right? The event isn't actually going yet. So you think that I'm at my hotel when the event's on. No, the event isn't fucking live. That was just shit that happened yesterday, which they're playing today, which I wanted to catch up on. Bro. What the fuck? How fucking weird is it, chat, that they're just making two completely different games? I feel like this is a thing that no one's talking about that's like so crazy and so big. And it doesn't make fucking sense. Like, what the fuck? Like crafting's different. That you can't just like you no longer farm base types and then elk spam them and fucking chaos spam them. Like you're gonna have to like find items in the ground and craft them and fucking none of the uniques are the same. They don't trade off you. They're completely different games with completely different characters, with completely different fucking end games and completely different end game content. So they make a leak for PoE 1. Well, guess what? It's on a PoE 2. What the fuck? Giga confusing. Like, is it good or is it bad? Because I don't know if it's good. And then, like, I don't know. How many people are they going to play PoE 1? Is PoE 1 just going to be some, like, experimentation bullshit where they just use it, like, oh, we got this old fucking thing, which we barely update. We just got, like, 10 guys working on it. and then they just release some fucking random league just to experiment with some weird shit. And then they have to look, you know. PoE2 sucks and you go into PoE1. Yeah. I don't wrong. Do you know what? It's kind of... Do you know what? If that's how it had been announced, right? That PoE2 is a new game and it's separate, then it wouldn't be confusing, would it? It wouldn't be confusing, would it? I'm going 5,000 miles to meet Con 69. Meanwhile... Okay, and he's got... Oh, this? I don't know if you guys can see this. Okay, dude. Okay, dude. Whatever, bro. Shut the hell up, bitch. Shut the fuck up. You fucking bitch. No. Okay. The event isn't fucking live yet, is it, boys? The event isn't fucking live. So, yeah. I'm not doing HotelCon. Abby's coming back. Fuck. Okay. For starters, I wanted to watch that shit we just watched. Now I am going into the event. But I'm using old pants right now. Abby's bringing pants. So I don't have fucking pants right now. I mean, this thing is coming up next, Gadget Chief Grimmer Valley. Yeah, I don't know. It's live in 6 minutes. Yeah, wait, where's the schedule though? Where's the schedule though? Can someone link the schedule to me? Is that possible to link the schedule? Just admit, Matha was the Chad and you were the cook. What are you talking about? The fuck is he on about? Like, literally, what is he on about? Okay, part of Exile, full such ExileCon. Let's have a look here. Okay, so wait, this is Saturday. Okay, we're on Sunday now, right? It's Sunday. Okay, so Sunday is... Well, I should do this on the computer where you guys can fucking see it, right? What am I doing? Wait, link it again. I'll do it on the computer so you guys can see it. Because I suppose it makes a little bit more sense, right? Okay, the fucking microphone may fall down. We'll have to see. There we go. You guys can see this, right? Okay, let's see. So obviously yesterday, chat, I discovered, you know, the fact that the fucking streaming stage, you can't watch the streaming stage stuff at ExileCon, which is fucking ridiculous, fucking retarded. So we need to decide, what do I actually want to watch? Because ultimately, right, I can just watch the VOD, you know, whereas I can only go and IRL stream in ExileCon, you know, just time. This is the last day. This is the last time I can do that. Whereas the VOD will always exist, and I can always watch that. But I don't want to miss a massive fucking big-ass announcement, right? Okay, let me see here. So this is what's about to start. So we just watched item design and mechanics, right? We just watched that, yeah? We just watched all these three. The rendering one was kind of beige. The boss one was pretty good, and then the item one was kind of fucking crazy, right? Oh, I see. So they're seating right now. Oh, wait, what the fuck? Yes, I couldn't watch the stream around table. Well, I mean, no. They're just gonna fucking stall, basically. Okay, so I should go watch this, right? We should watch this one for sure. Oh shit, my meet and greet. Yo, my meet and greet is at 11:15. Oh, what the fuck? Oh no. Oh no. Oh, then we got the race today at 4, boys. We got the race today at 4. Oh shit, I gotta be in. So I gotta be in the place. I gotta be in the place for the meet and greet, boys. Yeah, I can't miss that. Yeah, I didn't forget. I just thought it was later in the day, bro, or some shit. Like, jeez, Louise. Okay. Who cares about the race? Well, Thai 23 is gonna be in the race, and you know you're gonna have Thai 23. You're gonna have all those motherfuckers. It should be very poggies. Okay, no, I think what I do is this. Wait, it's 9:30, so it's 10. So I could get my shit and I could head in and I could be sitting down for this. Thing is, if I want to talk, I mean, maybe I watch this at the hotel. Maybe I watch this at the hotel and then I go in. What do you guys think? And then, as I walk into the convention, you guys can just watch Crip play the game for a little bit. And then, bang, I cut to the meet and greet or something. What do you guys think? Well, I want to watch this. I mean, I got 30 minutes. Well, let me think here. I'd have 30 minutes to get to the place. Dude, the question is, can I get to the convention, get to the seat, and be chilling by the time fucking... I don't know if I can, bro. I don't know if I can. Wait, and then how long have I got here? Wait, that ends at 11. Oh, that means I'd have 15 minutes to do the meet and greet, dude. I'd have 15 minutes to do the meet and greet. If I watch this whole thing. I mean, bro, I'm a tiny bit late to my meet and greet. It'd be fine, dude. I mean, I'm not going to be late. It'll be fine. HotelCon, let's go, boys. Okay, what does chat reckon? Wait, what are you guys saying? What does chat reckon? Methyl can carry. Just crack a bottle on the hotel. Just chill, bro. Fuck it. Bro, I'm fucking tired, man. Like today, you have no idea. We were doing meet and greet the whole of yesterday, bro. We're just trying to get back, man. Poll it. Okay, wait. I should. Oh, here. Oh. Wait. Okay, fuck. All right. All right. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get ready to switch over. Yo, Teo, are you listening, Teo? Can we cut to the main feed? Can you cut to the computer feed? So that way you guys can watch from my home PC. So that way I can unplug the camera and shit without effing everyone. Can we go main feed? No camp. Yeah, what the fuck? What's the audio sound for?
Roundtable here. We're going to be talking pretty much everything that happened yesterday. PoE 2. And I'm joined by Gazi, Velina, and DS Lily here. And yesterday was an incredible day. So much was announced. 6 new classes for PoE 2. PoE 2 as a standalone game. And of course, so many more customization options. I don't even know what to think. What was your main takeaway, Lily? Seeing that massive announcement. For 4 years, we haven't heard anything.
Oh, shit.
Oh, it was crazy. I think it's going to be a really good change of pace. So, with PoE 2, it's a lot slower in the demo. I mean, that might scare some people, but it felt in a good way to me. You couldn't just, turn your brain off completely. I mean, if you want to do that, then I guess, but, I kept dying on the warrior when I ran in.
Classic.
They're just so much faster than me. I mean, it could have been the gear. The gear is a little weird in the demo.
Yeah.
So I think it'll end up actually being a little bit faster than what we played, but...
Oh, absolutely. The warrior, I actually took some notes. The warrior only had 35% all res, and they're in Act 4, which is kind of Act 7. So you were dealt a little bit of a rough hand there on the warrior for sure. Yeah. What about you, Gazi? What was your main takeaway from yesterday? That
Gazi TV, log in.
Obviously looking at the minion aspect of things, but I think that the pace of the game is definitely in a much slower state. Obviously, we're playing at the PoE gameplay that we've been playing for PoE 2 has been at a difficulty that's ramped up quite significantly, which obviously presents us with a bit of a skewed experience from what I think we're going to see in next year's beta. But outside of that, I felt like the generic play style where we gather a lot of enemies up and then we burst them down in a big AoE pack and then move on to the next one, which is kind of the main play style that we see from a lot of zooming approaches in PoE 1, does not really work in PoE 2, at least the gameplay we've been doing. I play the Sorcerer and that was rough.
One thing to note, though, is they gave us a blue weapon with 1 mod on it. Even the warrior in Act 4, 1 mod. It's oh, man, they made it really tough.
They did.
Yeah, so what about you, Valenia? Yesterday, what was your main, big, shocking takeaway?
How smooth the co-op gameplay was. I was actually just impressed incredibly by how smooth it was with having those two on the screen together and interacting with one another without just one speeding up ahead over the other. and completely annihilating things while the other one's just lagging behind. That was really impressive to me. It made it like I actually wanted to do co-op gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things with PoE is kind of, because you kind of feel like you have to one-shot the monsters a little bit in PoE 1, but because there's like a little bit more opportunity for all these crazy synergies and big burst windows and stuff like that, I feel like group play might actually be like a whole lot more pronounced in PoE 2 potentially.
Exactly. It seems actually viable to do group play without just having an Aurabot with you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, there was so many things for PoE 2, but there was also the new PoE 1 League Trial of the Ancestors. Did you guys,
stop
what was your
cocking
impression of
and
that league? We
boobaing
didn't get too much
at
info, you know,
everyone?
the tattoos, the new mode, but what did you guys like? What's your main takeaway from that? We'll start with you, Gazzy.
I'm a big fan of tattoos, as you might see. I mean, I'm just saying. I'm also a big fan of TFT and Dota Battle Chess or Auto Battle games in general. I'm very excited for it. Then again, I also feel that there is obviously the concern that we're going to end up with a situation where the players are so geared up to their teeth that they're just going to ignore the actual mechanic, just rush for the totems, and it's over. So it's going to be fun to see how they balance that to make sure that we actually engage with the mechanic to play the actual auto game or auto battle if you want to. And yeah, I think that it's a fun thing because it's right up my alley in terms of what I enjoy playing games with. So,
What about you, Valina?
I think that it looks really, really different. Like, I'm not sure what to expect when creating my party. And if I really am going to need that party, I'm kind of hoping that eventually I'm not really going to need that party.
A bit like a Blight situation where you kind of, the towers are kind of good, but you don't need them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm hoping that
Everyone's
I can
gonna
just
chase
zerg
it.
it down without
Let's
having
be
to
honest.
worry about making sure that my setup is correct. But that's something for later.
Absolutely. I think it'll be pretty hard on League Start at least.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What about the hardcore perspective? Because like they said that you don't die when you die. Is that like that's like a big thing, right?
That might, if there's any like races, that might be a good place to farm gear, like over farm. Like if there's like a gauntlet, then you just sit there for I don't know, like 3 days. I mean, you can't die, so you just keep farming gear. Well, I guess
You can't do it indefinitely,
they
right?
mentioned how you like get the next thing. You might have to do maps,
You know, silver coin, 1 silver coin to do one of the missions.
right? So that'll definitely be. If the loot is good early, you'll definitely see people doing that in hardcore, just sitting there, farming it, sitting there. It's pretty fun. Farming it.
Yeah, I mean, you also get some allies, which is a pretty big bonus. Absolutely, which is a pretty big bonus. Absolutely. Definitely very, very cool. And obviously, we've got all the new customization coming with that league, but we also have Sanctum League coming back. So, does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I am so excited about that. I cannot wait to just run Sanctums all day again. I'm going to be buying Sanctums. I just know it.
Well, I know who to sell my Sanctums to then. Because, yeah, I mean, you can just do that one mechanic. That's not even something you could do in Sanctum League. So, that's like massive quality of life that they're adding there. And it's really, really good. So absolutely. Hopefully we get Original Sin back. That'd be pretty cool. That was a sick ring. Absolutely.
I feel like I'm in the same boat as you agreeing with this. Like, Sanctum League was amazing for a lot of players. There were so many people that just wanted to run that and the challenge of doing the no-hit runs. I love the idea of it. I think it was really, really good and resonated very well with the community. Me personally, I was busy crafting. I was busy doing my menu stuffs and my caster builds. Sanctum was not of interest to me. I liked the idea of it, but it was more like I need a break from what I'm doing. I did a couple of Sanctums, but that's how I felt about it. But since it did so well in the community, I think it's going to fit very well as a core mechanic in the game.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. What about you, Lily? Sanctum enjoyer?
I am a Sanctum enjoyer.
Okay.
I hope the loot is like not nerfed too bad. Like I hope it's pretty similar because there's a really good source of divines, and right now divines are kind of in a spot where, especially if you're playing like SSF, it's pretty hard to craft. Like in Crucible, there wasn't that many divine drops, so Sanctum would be a really good source of that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's fun as well, so I'm all for it. Absolutely. Very, very good. We've got the new skill gems as well. Those are a few spicy ones in there. I think Vengeance Cascades maybe going to get taken around back, but that's okay. We'll be all good with it. Absolutely. But just moving back to PoE 2, we saw so much new stuff. But I'm sure everyone was cooking up some build ideas, at least a little bit, when they saw all of those new skill gems and the new skill system. For me, it was definitely the trigger on shock. I was like, oh man, surely if I combine that with like spark and like chance to shock. And I asked one of the guys on the floor, and I'm like, does this have like a cooldown, like to trigger skills? He's like, not at the moment. So you could, in theory, just trigger so much stuff by using spark. And that would be something that I'd be like pretty interested to try. What about you guys? Lily, did you have any like crazy build ideas when you saw the new systems?
So the one, I'm not sure what it's called, but the is like you lose energy shield and it casts spells.
Oh my gosh,
so
yes.
you could stack like 30k energy shield and then just have a ton of spells going off. If it works like that, depends like if it's percentage, then that might not work so well. But if it's just like a flat amount, you could just stack a crazy amount and like it'll be like kind of like Molten Shell when that was a build and you just walk around and then it explodes.
Surely Eldritch Battery can't be in the game because you'd be able to consume the energy shield and then trigger them all. Like, there's no way. That would be so broken.
That definitely does not work. That'd be crazy if it did.
I mean, it might.
Maybe with like a less damage multiplier.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty strong, though. And, of course, give us the minion perspective, Gazi. With Spirit, the new way to reserve auras, but also summon minions, and you can get a ton of it on your gear now, and it's like on scepters, rings, amulets. What's it looking like from your perspective as the minion master?
Very hollow, I would say. There's a lot of lack of detailed information, how we're going to combine auras together with the minions. We have received the information that we can summon what's called unlimited amount of minions, as long as you have the Spirit for it. But we're also expecting to have that combined with auras to make sure that our minions gets buffed. So it's going to be a balance act between our auras and our minions, unless there are other mechanics they have in store for us. What's really interesting with PoE 2 in the gameplay approach is obviously the fact that they want us to run with a combination of spells. They don't want us to have one-button builds like the Magic Find KB, Tornado Shots, and you know all about that. So, but minion builds in PoE 1 is already, in many cases, a very active gameplay approach. You have the Predator support, you have a Convocation, you have your curses, and your positioning, and it needs to be considered as well as your minions positioning. So the gameplay already is very active, which is one of the main reasons I enjoy playing it so much. Now in PoE 2, they want to get that to the other builds. So it will be very interesting to see how they actually going to plan to change the minion playstyle to become more active than it already is. But since we don't have those details, it's very hard to say.
Absolutely. So one thing which I was super duper curious about, at least for me, for PoE 2, because you get all these 6 links, right? It's like, as a minion player, the Spirit only takes the permanent minions to like kind of reserve. So what about all these temporary minions that are in the game right now? You could in theory have like, 20 summon raging spirits, all the skeletons out, and your specters and potentially zombies at the same time as well. Is that something you're cooking up already?
I mean, that's we're going to circle back to what we talked about with Cast on the Shock.
Oh.
Now imagine an Orb Storm out there where critical strike chance or increased shock chance and everything for that, and you put your little SRS on that one. That's going to permanently summon those on a boss target, and if you have that on a 6 link, or it's going to be a couple links fewer with the shocks, but still, you get those automatically summoned. Since they don't take spirits, you could theoretically, based on what we've seen so far, look at a pretty stacked up screen with minions.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my initial reaction. It seems like PoE 2, there's just so much more that they're kind of like wanting to allow us to do, like all these triggers, all these like crazy things going on. And there's also the support gem change, which hopefully we have time to talk about as well. But Velina, did you have any builds where you were like, oh my god, I need to try that as soon as I get my hands on PoE 2?
Not right now, because there's just too much.
Yep.
There's just so much that they've shown me that I don't, like, I'm overwhelmed by all the different new abilities that they've added, how smooth and fluid they look, what it's going to be like to try to combo them together. I'm really interested to see just how many skills out there that I can combo with, like, I don't know, Impale, for example.
Okay.
I would like to see what they plan. They said 240 new skill gems, right? Active skill gems.
Yeah.
Active. That's nuts.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
It's not just that, they've kind of like reworked all of the current skill gems as well. Like,
exactly.
Like Herald of Thunder, it's got 100% fizz to lightning conversion now.
Yeah.
Like what? Like that was like so hard to get before in PoE 1. You needed like gloves and all sorts of stuff to get that, but now it's just on a Herald.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like it's crazy. Like everything is changing.
Yeah. So I have no idea what I'm going to be doing I'm just overwhelmed by all the possibilities that they've given me.
Absolutely, yeah. And the other thing to consider is that everyone now also gets a brand new skill, which is baked into every single character, the dodge roll.
Yes.
Which the developers, they're like, it's overpowered, you gotta use it, absolutely. And it's pretty interesting, because when you're actually using it, it's like a completely different way to play. It's really strong on bosses in my experience, but what was your guys' experience with it? Maybe Gazi?
Well, we have a dodge roll in other games of recent releases, so it definitely reminded me of that approach. What's really funny is that they confirmed that we're going to be able to do this in town, as well as having shapeshifts.
Yep,
so we're going to see a lot of bears rolling in town. That's going to be very fun. I feel like the first few days, we're literally just going to see that in the cities.
Yep.
But no, I think that that element of the gameplay feels like you are having an actual proper reactional gameplay experience. I know that they've wanted to have that in PoE 1, where it's supposed to be reactive, but it's been very hard when you have a skeleton 2 screens away, one-shotting you in the higher maps with juiced-up mods. But in PoE 2 that we've seen so far, it's felt a lot better in terms of us being able to reactively play the game. There's a telegraphed explosion happening or a telegraphed big slam happening. You are able to actually genuinely dodge that, and even if you do the dodge ability, right as that ability lands, you're not going to take damage from it, unless it is an AoE ability, which would make sense. And I feel like that's a really good step in the right direction for the immersion of you actually playing the game in the way they want to, but it also fits very well in what I prefer to play as well.
Absolutely. I imagine on minions, it's going to be completely broken because you can be dodge rolling around while your minions are going to town. What does this mean for hardcore? Do you think it gives you more control, more agency, or is it kind of what do you think about that?
It definitely made the boss fights feel more fluid. So in hardcore, if say you run out of flame dash charges, right? I mean, you're kind of just running around awkwardly, or you kind of dodge slightly, you're out of flasks, everything. So you're just kind of awkwardly moving around there, just force move, right? But now you can dodge and made it a lot more fluid. So you can dodge around the boss and make sure you're in its safe spot behind its back, like a lot of bosses have. If you just stay behind their back, you're good. But they flip around, then you can flip around them. You don't just awkwardly walk around.
Yeah, absolutely. I found on the Huntress, Valina, because you also played the Huntress, it felt particularly good because the melee attacks were so snappy. You could attack, roll.
Yes.
And that definitely felt really strong. Did you like that as well?
Oh my god, that felt so smooth. That was such a nice, the first boss that I fought, which, by the way, very deadly.
Very deadly,
very deadly. When I finally got the dodge roll with their attacks, finally dodging just before they hit me and then hitting them, that felt so satisfying to actually do. That was a really, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, it was exciting. It was just exciting to have gameplay like that, because in PoE 1, you either zerg down the bosses and not care about what they do, or you're flailing around trying to wait for your dashes to come back.
Yep.
So yeah, I really appreciate the dodge roll, and I love that there's no cooldown on it.
Yes, there is literally no cooldown. If the enemy is attacking or shooting, you can spam dodge roll and be kind of almost pseudo-immune while you're dodging. You obviously have to take them out, and you'll need to attack sometimes, but you can just roll as much as you want.
Yeah.
Unless you're playing minions.
How are they going to balance that, man? I have no idea.
But there seems to be a time frame where after a dodge, your character has to get up on their feet, and that time frame seems to be a frame where you're actually able to take damage. So it doesn't seem like you're able to just roll. You're immune to everything except AoE damages, because that would be broken, especially for totem builds, minion builds, or even dot builds in that sequences as well. But I definitely think that there is definitely a time frame where you're still being able to hit, but you can do that initial immunity roll when you see a well-telegraphed ability flying your way, so to say.
Yeah, I'm sure the guys in PoE, everyone's going to analyze what the exact immunity window is and all sorts of stuff that. So I'm sure we'll get a lot out of that. But there is also just so much coming in the form of this weapon swap thing as well. Like, I didn't really get too much of an opportunity to mess with it myself. It's more like of a conceptual thing, because we didn't have the Alice passive, the skill tree on the demo. So we couldn't do the kind of 10 points here, 10 points there. But do you guys actually think that you'll be able to like modify some of your builds just kind of in the PoE 1 context with that in mind? Like, would you... Like, for me at least, I was like, okay, I can have 2 bows, I could put 10 ballista points here and put like 10 movement speed points here and like kind of have my bossing and my movement speed set up and weapon swap between those. Do you guys have that kind of feeling as well, or?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to like think about with current PoE. Like, it's really like, it really goes against it. Like, PoE 1, you just do only one type of damage, like 99.9% of the time. Then PoE 2, they're trying to get you to do like other thing and mix and match more. But like the only thing I can think of in terms of what we know and like from our past knowledge of PoE 1, which doesn't seem like it'll carry over at all. Just I'm thinking like a lot of utility.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you guys?
I feel like they provide us with the option to have a generic clearing setup, like you talked about, having a weapon setup for your clearing, and then you have an entire setup, not just the weapon, but the skill trees change. You can have your 6-link setup for it as well. And if you look at the builds that was going to use a lot of Rs or minions for that matter as well, you do have that option with the weapon swap and those 10 points to have a more of a focus on your clearing aspect on one end, and then you might even just quickly switch 2 Rs for a boss and then do that and have an optimized setup for the actual sake of bossing or single target boss fights in general. So I think it's a really cool system. I do wonder how well it's going to plan out for certain builds. Will obviously be kind of well-rounded beast to the point where it's not really needed. But it's going to be fun to see how they balance it to start with.
Absolutely, yeah. You got anything to add, Melina?
It's going to be really interesting, especially because these passive points only come off of books.
Yes, the books.
Which is going to be like, how many books are in the game? How many passive points am I going to be able to actually put around my tree to make this really worth it to do?
Absolutely.
But I think it's going to be really fun, and it's going to be definitely. I can't imagine trying to implement this in PoE 1. I really can't, because there's just no way that we play like that right now.
Yeah, I mean, with all these questions, it's fortunate that the next panel coming up is literally a Q&A. So it's kind of like we get to answer some of these questions. So, I mean, that's going to kind of be not one to miss. And we're going to be jumping over there, I'm assuming all of us right after. It's going to be huge. But one of the biggest changes, which I think we didn't hear too much about it initially, was the large change to the currency items that seem to be dropping in PoE 2. So, I mean, it's still a while out, so things can change. But right now, there doesn't seem to be any scouring orbs or alterations, and the Chaos Orb has been reworked to some extent. So there's not really any way to, forge a rare item specifically in your hideout other than an alchemy orb. And Gazi, tell us what this means for crafting.
Well, my wrist and fingers are very thankful for the change, I can tell you that, because I remember when we started playing PoE, I made a mirror amulet, or mirror service amulet, as the items are called, very high end, and it took me about 500,000 alterations orbs and a lot of time. My fingers were not happy with me. But, fast forward to where we are now, and we're looking at the PoE 2 change. I think that it's going to be a lot easier for new and casual players to actually engage with crafting. It's not going to be as advanced. You will also have an increased interest in looting items. Because now you're looking at an item, and you can look at it and see, well, the Chaos Orb will remove one mod and add another. And if I look at this item, there's only one mod I want to get rid of. So that would be something that would attract me to use the items on it. Whereas in the current state of Chaos Orbs, we're looking at using a Chaos Orb on the item, we'll scrap everything and re-roll all of the modifiers, and new players or casual players would not be incentivized enough to engage with crafting. So I think that the changes that we're seeing with this is definitely going to be in line for those. It obviously does bring up the question, how we're going to craft those high-end items for the 1% aspirational game chasers.
What about in solo self-found? I think you dabble in solo self-found, right, Lily?
Yeah, I split it between
bit different A, different B, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Solo Self-Found is kind of more in tune with the actual like full process,
Right.
without alterations, without scouring orbs, and we don't know about the lead mechanics yet. What does that do to kind of like the Solo Self-Found progression? Does it like change it a lot?
Yeah, it definitely changes it a lot. I mean, the Chaos Orb, I'm wondering if, like, I don't think they've mentioned it yet. I don't remember. It seems the new Chaos Orb kind of seems to me like the stuff you'll pick up will be a bit better, and maybe you only want to switch like one thing on it, because what it does is it like changes one thing and then
adds another one.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we'll see like better gear pickups, like they mentioned in ExileCon, the first one, and it'll just be picking stuff up will be your main source of getting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And my fellow Huntress gamer here, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a new currency, gold. And of course, you can buy items off the vendor, like flasks and stuff like that, but there is in fact a gambler in town, and you can use gold to gamble for infinite types of any item you would like. So it's essentially kind of like a Chaos Orb to some extent. You can like buy 10 spears and you could get uniques, rares, magic items. What do you think of that system, Valina?
I actually don't mind the new gold system. It's going to be really different. Like just the idea of using gold instead of using a transmute or using an alch or something like that to buy an item is going to be really weird. But I like the idea of there's a basic currency that has no other use but for this gambling. And that you get a pretty good amount of it when you first start out. Like, I know I couldn't actually gamble with any items, but I could get myself flasks in the first town, so that was really nice. And I like that it's auto pickup.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the auto pickup of it is so good. Although I think it has a limit of like 5,000, which is a little low, I'm gonna say.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's definitely. I mean, they can up that. They can pump those numbers up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gazzy, what did you think of the gold? Especially like because you can kind of just like print items with it, and it's auto pickup, so it almost feels like it's kind of going to be the new juice that you farm, right? It's like, yeah.
There's definitely different aspects of it. I do want to say that I do agree with Valina with the stack size. I want to take it one step further than that and say that it should be on a separate window. Now, I understand we're going to have to feel the weight of it, but it's already an auto pickup. Why would it need to take space in our inventory? Because the way a lot of in-game players, I think, is going to utilize the system is to gamble a lot of it. And 5,000 gold ain't going to cut it.
No.
So I definitely think people will sell these to make sure that people can buy it. But if we're going to look at it on the basic general idea of the gold system, I think it's a great addition to the game simply because it is locked behind the vendors, and you have a new or casual player playing the game, and they realize, hey, I have a ring that I used since level 12. I have to upgrade this piece to progress further because I'm struggling on this next boss. They can use their gold, and they can specifically say, I want that ring, and then roll a couple of rings from the gold gambling and see if they can get a rare one or a magic one that would fit their build. And I think that's a great way to basically not target farm, but you can target acquire the items that you need that you have on the worst slots for your characters, so you can progress that. And that immersion and level of character progression, I think, is really good on the early stage of the game. But late game, like you mentioned, I think it could definitely be one of those juice things. Pretty sure you already have some plans for buying a lot of gold, or at least theoretically buy a lot of gold, gamble those items that you want to go for, because there's obviously different aspects to it. You can get some uniques that might be high valued. You might be getting those rare items that the high-end crafters wants to use a couple of crafting sources on to get those really big ticket items on as well. I think it's a good system.
Absolutely. It's definitely a very new and interesting system. It mixes things up a lot. But I think overall, after playing the demo, my takeaway was that it's definitely got a lot more room to kind of use a lot more player skill. At least that's how it felt. Like on the Sorcerer, you got to use a Frost Wall to make sure the mobs don't get to you and stun you, and all sorts of stuff like that. Overall, do you guys like the combo kind of play style, or did you like kind of like maybe want to go for a more one skill? What was your overall feel with the demo? Just to wrap us up here. Lily, we'll start with you.
I really liked how it felt. I think it really makes sense that they split the game because it is just so different in pacing and everything. But I think it felt good. I do like that PoE 1 still will get updates. So when I do want to play the one-button builds and just blast through, I can go play that. And then when I want to do the combos, I can play PoE too. And I usually always play like 2-button builds, so it's really good for me.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. What about you, Valina?
I'm a 1-button build enjoyer. I'm not going to deny it. So for me, it's going to be it's a learning curve to get through to actually fight these new monsters with this whole new arsenal that I have that I'm not prepared to really use, because I'm so used to just attack with this one button. Let's just go.
Yep.
So it's gonna be different, but I actually enjoyed what I played so far. I found it really engaging, and that's something that I don't necessarily get as much of in the original Path, because it's just one button, baby.
One button, baby. Hell yeah. What about you, Gazzy, to finish us off in a couple minutes here?
Play minions at PoE 1. We're already very active in the gameplay. It's something that I adore when it comes to RPG games, which is probably why I enjoy playing it so much, but also why I like playing things like Dark Pact or Totems. So I already have that approach of active gameplay. So having that in a sense of combinations of skills, I do like the fact that there aren't any big cooldowns on the abilities. You can spam them, but the best way to use them is obviously in the correct order, if you will. I also feel like as a min-maxer, the system obviously ended up with this is the best for AoE clearing, such as a sorcerer. To get a quick example of this would be that I would try to gather up a back of enemies, not too many because that was hard. Gather up a back of enemies, and then you would Ice Nova those and then use your comment. And then if there was a really big guy in there, you would use the staff to get the unleash on that and just drop down 3 comments on it. And that was mostly enough to clear it. And then for bosses, I tend to use that mana search thing, use the arc on it because that was good damage, frostwall things off, like a utility option. But I didn't feel like I had any big combos for the bigger targets. It was mostly these are the good 2 abilities I would use for clearing, and this is the 2, maybe 3 that I would use for single target. And I do like it because it does change the gameplay depending on what you're actually facing. So that's something that I really appreciated a lot outside of playing minion builds, to have that in the non-minion builds archetypes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think overall, it's definitely a new game, but it's a blast to play, absolutely. So we really just want to find out more, so we're going to go straight over to the Q&A now, and it's going to be very interesting to see what we see.